Yep, and then I need the big ones, yeah, big one right there.
30 to 40.
Yeah.
How many?
Like if I could get 6 of these and 6 of those.
Not many.
No, okay. These I'll take, okay, and I'll look through this during the meeting. Take on both. I'm trying to find some. Will Andy charge me to come here to sign that? Or, I'm gonna have to get the electronic e-sign.
You never drop it in the I just put it in there.
Yeah, you know Brett,
That's how his name is.
he was a president at the town, and remember, you don't know John Toshner?
So what's Brett's division now?
He works for the bank.
No, but he's a planner.
He came in, it's like,
He had a So he's probably in the view.
well, he did, and did the letter of credit, for Doug, and Doug came in right away and 3 weeks. He just wanted to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
I moved as fast as I could as soon as I saw it.
You were very fast.
It's 7 o'clock. I'd like to, good evening, and I'd like to call the Village of Vernon Plan Commission meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. And we stay standing for a moment of silence, if you would, please. Thank you. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We do have property owners, petitioners in. I think everybody's spaced out enough, everybody comfortable, you know, with distancing and so on. Looks pretty good. So we will start with roll call and open meetings law compliance check.
President Carl Fortner,
Present.
Trustee Commissioner Jim Solani,
Present.
Commissioner Dan Nowak,
Present.
Trustee Commissioner Fred Mahalik,
Present.
Commissioner Jamie Schleisman,
Present.
Mr. President, note for the record, you do have a quorum of your Plan Commission. Also note for the record that Sean Malarkey, the Village of Vernon's planner and zoning administrator, is here. And our building inspector, Vince Budiak, is also here. Mr. President, I just wanted to let you know that the agenda was posted inside and outside the Vernon Town Hall, to the media, on the Town of Vernon's website. You're in full compliance with the open meetings law.
Thank you. First up on the agenda is an accessory building request for Mr. Jesse Apps. Is he here today? Yes, sir, good. And the property is located at W255S8615 Hilo Drive. Sean, you want to kick us off on this, and we'll get Mr. Apps to come up and answer questions. Maybe just come right up and be ready.
Sure. So the property itself is 19.37 acres on Hilo Drive. It's zoned A5 Mini Farm District. Future land use is rural residential, which is a 5-acre density. So what they're requesting is approval of a 60-foot by 104-foot accessory building. That's 6,240 square feet, which will be used for storage of residential and agricultural equipment and personal items. The height of the building is 26 feet, measured from peak to grade. The application shows the materials for the proposed building is vertical light gray metal siding with charcoal gray wainscoting on the bottom, and then also charcoal gray trim and roof as well. Our ordinance is section 125-10C4 requires that anything over 3,000 square feet for an accessory building is reviewed by the Plan Commission. So in terms of basically meeting the intent of our ordinance, it does. In my staff report, I've sort of mirrored section 125 in terms of what the rules and requirements are, the zoning requirements, and so everything being proposed meets the requirement of the ordinance itself in terms of size, number of buildings, setbacks, building separation, et cetera. The one thing that's important to note, though, is that what's required is that the Plan Commission needs to consider whether the requested building would be consistent with the general intent of the chapter, whether the request would adversely affect property owners in the surrounding area, and any other factors that may be relevant to the application. Upon consideration of these factors, but without necessarily making affirmative findings, the Plan Commission should determine whether the accessory building is objectively reasonable. And so there's also a deed restriction requirement. Anything above 900 square feet for accessory buildings does require a deed restriction to be placed in the property, that it cannot be used for commercial or industrial purposes. And the only other thing I want to mention is the height. Normally, accessory building height's limited to 18 feet. However, this particular building is 26 feet measured from peak to grade. We do have a provision in the ordinance, section 300-10D, that allows the height to be increased provided all other offsets and setbacks are increased by a foot for each foot above 18 feet. And so they're going an additional about 8 feet, and so all of the setbacks and offsets are far exceed what would be required for that height increase. So I have prepared a list of conditions that the Plan Commission chooses to approve the building request. But I guess finally, the last thing I'd mention is that there is, I don't think you have an aerial in front of you as part of the application, but there is a tree line to the north, and there are trees along the road right of way as well. So there is some screening from the properties to the north for the potential accessory building. That's all I have.
So you've got the map up. Where exactly is it?
Can you zoom in, Karen?
Make sure that everyone.
Go scoot to the right. The other way, sorry. By the house, yeah, just north of the house is where the accessory building will be. To the north of it. Nope, to the east, right up to the north of the house.
Right here.
Little further north.
Right here.
Yeah, and so there's another tree line on the northern property line as well. Yeah, and then there's some vegetation out front as well. So there'd be some buffering and screening.
So this is where Jesse.
That's right, that's where the building will go.
Right there.
Mhm.
Right there?
Yeah, a little more
A
north.
little bit more north, but generally north
Yep.
of the house, right?
Yep,
Well, we
exactly.
probably should have you state your name and address for the record so that if we
Uh,
ask you questions, you can just answer them.
Sure, Jesse Apps, W255, S8615, Hilo Drive.
Thank you. Sean, you mentioned that it could be the land could be subdivided in the future. Is that going to prevent, this building going to prevent subdivision? It seems to me, even if you carve off 5 acres for the current home and the building, you're still going to be underneath 3%, or it's going to be awfully close.
Yeah, they're allowed 25,000 square feet of accessory building on a parcel.
On that size
On a
lot.
parcel this size.
But if they subdivide that parcel,
Well, it may be tough to subdivide based on the location of the future accessory building.
that's what I was asking.
So I don't think I comment on subdivision in my
You
staff
didn't.
report.
Is this on environmental folder adoption?
In the back, yeah, in the back it is. Basically, the density for the property it requires 5 acres for each dwelling unit. They have 19 acres. Hypothetically, they could get, in addition to the existing home, they could get 2 more.
Right.
They could get 2 more lots if in the future you wanted to subdivide. But yes, putting the accessory building where it is would definitely put a kink on future subdivision.
And you understand?
Yep.
Mr. Epps, you understand that? Yeah. Just trying to prevent problems in the future, because that seems, all the plan commission does is try to solve problems created in the past.
Sure.
Yeah, in actuality, based on the way that the neighboring properties are developed and the access to the road, you probably realistically, unless you wanted to build a road, which may not be financially feasible for a couple lots, you're pretty much limited to maybe 1 additional home, and that would be where the location of the accessory building would be, next to each other. Yeah, that's all wet and environmental corridor in the back, so you might get a house where the accessory building's proposed, but the petitioner doesn't seem to be interested in that. And we're not necessarily pushing for it to be divided, just so you know.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of it and thought about it, that's all.
Yeah, no intention of doing that, so.
And Jesse knows there's a deed restriction.
Sure, no commercial or industrial purposes, residential and farm use only.
And you've read Sean's report and all the conditions?
Yeah,
Okay, and you're in agreement with them? You know, one question I did have, you know, you'll have opportunity to talk here in a minute. I thought I'd just get this off. One of the conditions, Sean, is, and it follows our ordinance, and I understand that accessory building constructed in such a way the exterior appearance is compatible with the principal building, determined by our building inspector, who happens to be in the audience. How does that, you know, the application is coming in, it's a Menards building
Right.
and steel siding, and you know, is that compatible with the
Yeah.
I don't think you have steel siding on your house, so.
I'm under a Ford model right now, so my plan was to tie the light gray with my light gray exterior of the house. That was my take on it.
Yeah, so we don't require like compatible materials in the house for each accessory structure. It's just kind of mirror basically the colors of the house as close as possible.
Yeah, that's been traditionally how it's done when it doesn't come to the plan commission. Obviously, because this is in front of the plan commission, if you have concerns, this would be the time to mention them.
Well, I know our
And we
ordinance,
could
that's
add
what
any
it says,
additional-
and it defers to our building inspector.
Right, because that's what the code says.
Says, right.
But we have, you know, the plan commission has the right to consider the whole thing with relation to compatibility and property owners and surroundings.
Okay, questions? I wanted to raise it, get it up on the,
Now, the only
Board, that's all.
concern I have is the use of the building. What is your intended use? And
Storage between trailers and my personal stuff, you know, it's gonna be pretty full as is, and with the potential of ag in the future.
potential ag?
Well, you know, it's, I lease the property out now to get farmed.
You lease it out.
Right now I do, yes.
And I don't see the purpose of having all this room for agricultural use or,
I just look at it, I'm putting a lot of time and effort in this property, and I just don't wanna look like a used car lot. I mean, I have enclosed trailers, dump trailers, I mean, all my stuff, it'd be nice to be put away and look tidy on the property. That's where I'm going with it.
I guess my only concern is the number of garage doors on here. Never seen that many on an agricultural building even, you know, on a farm or something. But
So what's being stored in there is what exactly? It's not personal items, it's commercial items?
Well, no, it's personal items. I have a few enclosed trailers. I have a few equipment trailers for myself. I mean, my skid loader, all our,
But what do you use them for?
the property, my property up north,
Okay,
It's all personal equipment.
all
it's all
personal
personal
stuff.
equipment.
And you're aware, Article number 7, no commercial or industrial.
Yep, yes, sir.
Yeah, he's not necessarily required to use it for farm use. It can be a residential, accessory building. But-
it looks like a commercial building to me, that's the only concern I
Sure.
got. But that portion won't be facing the road.
He'll be
so
facing his house, the garage doors will be facing your home.
That was kind of my gear too. I mean, keep the doors away from the road. That way no one can see what I have inside of it and kind of keeps it looking appealing, I
Those
guess.
are mighty big doors for personal equipment.
I just have some big trailers, tall
Yeah.
trailers, stuff like that.
Sean, the doors facing the house, that's clear on this little diagram, I can't hardly read it, but is that right?
They
Is a
are.
condition?
There's
Okay.
the wall of doors faces the house.
Probably be nice to have some landscaping along that east side,
Facing the road.
right? Break up the length of that 60 feet there, no windows or anything there. I don't think it's our position to
No, it's certainly a consideration. I
acquire
mean,
anything, but,
it's a consideration. I mean, you determine compatibility
you know.
and how it fits in with the neighborhood, and so that's something you could require if you chose, if that was the agreement of the plan commission.
I think you do mention that in your report, don't you, that we could require screening, or does the ordinance say that?
Well, it talks about compatibility and.
Compatibility.
And surroundings with the neighborhood, so not to adversely affect property owners in the area. So we don't have a landscape ordinance in Vernon. We don't have something that says, when you do this, you have to do this much
Right.
landscaping, but it's, I think it's up for debate here.
We can't list that as a condition, though.
You could,
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
but we have no plan to look at or anything.
No, but we could, if you thought that landscaping was an important thing, we could say so many arborvitae along the edge, or every 10 feet an arborvitae for the east face of for the building, or some other shrub, and then that would just, that'd be a requirement of the permit.
do you,
It'd be a
Mr.
condition of both the zoning permit and the building permit.
Right.
Mr. Epps, do you have any plans for any landscaping on the, I guess it would be the east side of that building where there are no windows and it faces high-low, right? So we're talking about,
Right.
right?
I mean, I had nothing in mind. It's pretty shielded off high-low. I mean, there's a good tree line off the road line. And it's kind of pushed back from the wood line itself too on the north side, so it's not like it's gonna be right on the top of my property hill, where it's farmed. It's kind of tucked back, and the neighbor to the north can't really see it. The neighbor to the south can't really see it, and I don't even know if the neighbor across the street is really gonna have, he'll be able to see it, but it's not gonna stick out, like a sore thumb.
About trees on high-low, I guess.
There are, I mentioned that earlier, there are some trees along high-low, and there's trees along that north property line.
I'd say on the property on high-low, there's probably 8 trees in front of there, I guess, between where the building would be and high-low. And then the north side, I won't even be able to see that neighbor's property when the building's up, because that woods will be established still.
Right.
So
Right.
it won't be like a hindrance to the neighbor to the north. They probably won't even see it.
And your neighbor to the south sees your house. Maybe
Yeah,
to the east across the road would be the only one that could possibly see it through the tree, maybe.
yep. He might see a corner of it, you know, the front corner, but.
So the landscaping is basically a suggestion.
No, we can make it a requirement.
You could if you wanted, you certainly could.
And like you say, Sean, what would we say? We could have a plant.
Well, the easiest thing to plant and to provide adequate screening is usually arborvitae. It's fast growing, it's tall, and they're usually planted about 10 feet on center. And so that, if you wanted to, that would be a simple solution. If you wanted to provide additional screening from above and beyond what's on high level.
When do you want to get started?
I was hoping to purchase it tomorrow,
Okay.
try and beat the winter.
Okay. Soon then.
Yes, sir.
So the building is 60 feet wide. You could require 6 arborvitae out there in front of the building if you had a mind to.
That would be fine. I guess I just don't like them stacked up, you know, at 10 feet apart, but even if you had some little planting on that southwest corner and come around the building, maybe 10, 15 feet or something, then
Which corner?
be the southwest.
I think you're talking about, Dan, are you talking about these approaches that comes into the?
Yeah, exactly, right.
Comes into the building. That's south, yeah, the southwest corner, and he makes that turn to go into the overhead door.
Southwest.
Right here?
Southeast corner, I think.
Be towards
Do
the,
you want to bring,
towards the house there, yeah.
could you bring up the actual plan that was submitted showing the building? Oh, you don't have it? Sorry. Okay. Well, I do, but I don't have access to the screen.
These little houses here, little shed?
You've got one outbuilding already, right?
Yeah,
The
those.
little
two are-
one.
Those two are down.
Those are gone. There's only one little one behind the house.
I mean, there
Yeah.
might be a
Back
wall
up,
up, that's
yeah.
about it.
So this is gone.
Yes.
And these are all trees here, Jesse?
Yep.
So Dan, what are you thinking? The southeast corner of the building? Of the accessory building?
Southeast corner, right,
Of the accessory building?
correct. To come around the front mainly, but from the road, it would hide a lot of the view of a lot of the garage doors, you know.
Oh, I see. The
Oh,
garage
that's
doors,
what-
not the side, but the garage doors that are pointing toward,
Right,
to the south, towards
Correct.
the house. So you're focused on the southeast corner more than the entire east.
correct, because apparently there are trees along there, but
Right, there's some on Hilo, right? Yeah. Any commissioners, any thoughts about that? Doesn't have to be 6, could be 3,
Yeah.
whatever.
We could say 3 arborvitae near the southwest or southeast corner intended to screen a few of the garage doors or the garage doors from high-low, and then, we could take a closer look when you go plant them.
You can look as a staff, and if you and I as a staff, we can do a proposal when, zoning committee.
Right, just show us where you're thinking about putting them, and we'd say here, remove them a little bit, and so,
sounds good.
Yeah, so then you wouldn't have to come back here and we wouldn't have to slow you down. You could just work with Vince and Sean.
does that seem reasonable?
I mean, do they have to be arborvitae's? Can it be something different? 'Cause
What do you like?
I mean, can we just put some pines there or something?
Sure.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
that'd be even
just
better.
Evergreens?
Yeah, that'd be better.
I just,
Most people want to do arborvitae because they're so cheap and they grow fast, but if you wanted to do something else.
They're really messy.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I just don't wanna be
Yeah,
locked,
I see.
I just wanna be locked to a certain thing on my property where I have to put this in.
Sure, so evergreen
mean-
trees at an
Well-
initial planting height of what?
All the blue spruce in our area are dying, so I guess I wouldn't plant those, but,
Yeah,
Oh, the Colorado blues, no.
yeah,
But there's other evergreens.
right.
Other ones are good, but not looseness.
Okay.
They're dying off like, there's an insect or something that's.
So you think 3 would do it on the corner there? Especially if they're evergreens, so they get 20 feet wide.
Yeah,
That'd do it, it seems to me.
evergreen with an initial planting height of what?
What,
5 to 6 feet is usually typical for
Yeah.
planting.
minimum 5.
I guess let me ask you, where in conjunction with the building do I gotta plant these?
Sort of, the idea is at the southeast corner of the building, that sort of would be moved to the south enough to block a couple of doors, so to obscure the view to some of the doors.
I totally get that, I just don't wanna infringe on me being able
To turn from
to
your,
pull something in there and not being able to, cause I kinda set it up so I can come to the house and back my enclosed trailer, straight in, and to make that swing, I just don't wanna,
they'd probably all be within 10 to 15 feet of the building. I would
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
right.
yeah, yeah,
but they
yeah.
could be east, they could be towards the road,
Exactly,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
nothing,
so they don't be like right on the building, I can put them out and,
nothing on the south side. but-
What's your setback from the road to your corner of the building there? I can't read
I don't
the,
have it in front of me.
It's 112 feet.
112 feet. So there's plenty of room there. You could set them back 20, 30 feet, Sean, or,
Can you pull that, GIS back up again? There's like a clump where the, power pole is, and there's kinda some shielding there also already,
Want me to get even closer, Jesse?
if you could.
It's
It's kinda
not
like right in the
showing.
middle of the north field there.
We're seeing the screen.
What's that?
We're not seeing anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's got a minute. Are you talking right here, Jesse?
Yeah, go a little north with your cursor, a little east. Yep, like right there, zoom in on that there.
What is that?
That's a tree there with a
That's a
power
tree.
pole already, which is kinda off the corner as is.
is that, you're gonna save that tree?
That tree's gonna stay, that's where the power pole comes in from there, I had it buried going to the house. So that does give a lot of screen there itself too.
And these are all trees here, Jesse, right?
Yep,
The trees there. They're gonna go right.
That's a deciduous tree there by the pole, looks like it.
it's always been there, it's pretty big.
I mean, it's not an evergreen tree.
No,
It's got leaves.
it does, I don't know what you call it, but,
Yeah, it's a stick.
okay.
So the building isn't really gonna be that viewable from the road, is it?
In essence, no, it's really not. Yeah, I'm still planning on having this farmer come in for the next few years too, and, that finger on high-low was always farmed, and I wanna intend to, once I get this thing scored in and put in, I wanna have him keep farming as much as he can. It keeps up in the weeds, it keeps it look maintained, right now I have to mow that whole thing, and it's like every week, and it grows up like a hayfield, and I just don't wanna be locked in with these trees where I can't get their machines
Right,
to
yeah.
farm it either.
Right, that wouldn't be the point of it. The point would be to, I mean, the point would just be to screen it off, the view off of high-low. That could be 30 feet from the right-of-way and
Yeah,
off the
it's
road,
just,
right?
it's hard for us to tell exactly what's out there and what's not, and what we're screening, so it's difficult to know if it even makes sense to put a few trees there. Maybe they're not necessary, it's just hard.
Could we phrase it as to where the building goes up, and based on my final inspection by Vince, he kind of be the determining factor if he thinks it needs screening at that point?
We leave it up,
Suggestion.
Because it's gonna be appealing, it's gonna match the house, it's gonna be
Yeah.
upkept, it's a nice building, it really is.
So what will we say, let's put some on Vince now,
Right.
Or if I could submit pictures
Right.
from the road to you guys, and you guys make a decision on it, at that
When-
time,
Oh, at the time after it's built?
yeah.
No, you wouldn't plant anything anymore this year, it would be spring.
Probably or in the summer.
Could you continue the occupancy level on it? Landscaping plan to approve by the zoning and building administrator?
Well, we wouldn't have to even do that, I mean, it's just a condition of approval, so if you don't meet the conditions of approval, then you're in violation of zoning, and so we could cite him for not meeting the landscape requirement if he doesn't.
Yeah, or make him tear down the building, although we probably wouldn't do that, but, I mean, that would be the ultimate, right?
What would you like to do, have landscaping, any required landscaping near the southeast corner of the building, at the discretion of the building inspector after the building's completed?
Good idea.
I would prefer that as well. Initially, I was against the concept of forcing them to do anything on it because it's a a rural area. What's more rural looking than a big old farm building?
It's kind of easier way to make a determination that once the building's up, then we'll take a
Yeah.
look at it. And
Yes.
go from there.
So it'd be, well, how would you say that?
So what I have
Sean?
is the
Required-
building inspector to determine if any landscaping is required near the southeast corner of the building to screen garage doors once the building is
Screen garage doors from
from
high-low.
once the
okay.
building is completed.
To a maximum of 3 evergreen trees.
Do you want to have a max?
If necessary.
Is there a minimum?
Maybe none.
No, that's just,
So Dan, you would prefer up to a maximum of three
Max 3
Sure.
evergreens?
evergreens? And they have to be evergreens?
That's what you
That
wanted.
that provides the best screening.
Okay. So you're gonna put that in there too? That they have to be
maybe 0
evergreens?
to 3,
To a maximum of 3.
all right.
So he's determining if any landscaping is required
There you
near
go.
the southeast corner of the building to screen the garage doors from high-low to up to a maximum of 3 evergreen trees. Sound good?
Good, guy, Commissioner Noack, are you satisfied with that?
Yep.
Okay, Commissioner Jim?
Not fine.
Jamie? You good? Okay. So that would be an additional condition. Any other issues on these conditions or anything else? Any further discussion? Shall we ask for a motion then? John, are you, obviously, it's gotta be, he's got a sample, Sean's report at the bottom of page 2 has a sample motion in there. If you're inclined to approve this
With the additional condition.
with the conditions, including the new one that was just added for landscaping.
That was number 10, Sean? The trees.
We could call it the 10th condition, but I'll, in the permit itself, it'll probably be higher up somewhere.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that the Village of Vernon Plan Commission approves the accessory building request for Jesse Epps for the property located at West 255, South 8615, Hilo Drive, McConaughey, Wisconsin.
And I'll
With-
second.
With the conditions that have been
Presented
presented by our planner.
on today's date, Commissioner Nowak, on
Yes.
9/9/2000.
Right.
Right?
And I'll second that.
Plus the 10th, plus the additional one.
That's one of them that he's
Okay.
got apparently.
Okay. And we have a second.
Just a point of clarification, is that you're gonna include the 10th on your draft, so I don't have to put it as an additional part of their motion, correct? That the building inspector will determine.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, does everybody understand the motion on the floor? And you've got it, right?
I got it, yep.
Okay, Sean, you've got it? Okay. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay,
You're done, Jesse.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
you are welcome. We are now on item 4, letter B, Darrell Herman, conceptual review of a land division to create a 5-acre lot that would access Vassar Lane. The existing property is 20.07 acres. The property is located at W229 S7810 Big Bend Drive. Mr. Herman, could you come up and please state your name and address for the record?
Darrell Herman, W229S7850, Big Bend Drive, Big Bend, Wisconsin.
Sean, you want to kick us off? This is conceptual certified survey maps. so-
Sure. So what the petition is requesting is to split off a 5-acre lot adjacent to Vassar Lane on the east side of his property. The current property is 20.07 acres. It currently has access to Vassar Lane, but it also has access to 164 through an adjacent 3.95 acre property that's also owned by the petitioner. The property itself includes extensive environmental constraints, including wetlands and isolated natural resource areas. The Southeast Wisconsin Regional Plan Commission, Sewer PAC, staked the boundaries of both the isolated natural resource area and the wetlands in May 2020, and the petitioner's surveyor has surveyed those and included those on the plat of survey that was submitted with the application. In terms of zoning, property is zoned A3 suburban estate. This requires only a lot size of 2 acres, minimum average lot width of 175 feet. Property is planned for low-density residential, 20,000 square feet to 1.49 acres per dwelling unit, and then also environmentally sensitive areas, recognizing the isolated natural resource area and the wetland. In reality, though, the total development potential for the property is fairly limited because of the location of the wetlands, environmentally sensitive areas. Under the current zoning, based on the location of Vassar Lane, based on the fact that the property is split north and south by the wetlands, that it may only be possible to create about 2 lots in maximum coming off of Vassar Lane. That would give the potential new homes. So this scenario would only really be possible if the Vassar Lane cul-de-sac was extended onto the property. The home sites and the septic areas would be located outside of the isolated natural resource area and the wetlands. And so you could probably get 2 lots at the end of that extended cul-de-sac. I only bring that up as sort of that would be sort of the end game here if you wanted to fully develop that portion of the property. The point I want to spend some time on is Vassar Lane is a temporary cul-de-sac, and it dead ends into the east side of the property. And so looking at the village's official map, it does not actually depict the extension of Vassar Lane onto this property. It doesn't extend it into a permanent cul-de-sac. It doesn't extend it to another road network. And so it exists as a temporary cul-de-sac, and that isn't necessarily the end game for that roadway. It was never intended to end in a temporary cul-de-sac. The plat itself shows it as a temporary cul-de-sac to be extended in the future. It actually includes a note in the Sunset Glen subdivision to the east that says the temporary cul-de-sac will be extended at some time in the future when the property located to the west of this property, the adjacent parcel, is developed at the expense of the developer of the adjacent parcel. And so it was always the intention to extend that at some point in the future.
And just, sorry to interrupt you, and some of that temporary cul-de-sac is sitting on
Yeah, so
other property owners'
it is.
property.
That's a great point. So the paved bulb of the cul-de-sac itself juts into the properties north and south. So those are actually 2 outlots in the subdivision. But the pavement sits on those 2 lots that are owned by the homeowners to the east. And so there is public roadway that sits on private property to the east. The other point I want to make is that the remaining 15-acre lot to the west, which includes the existing home and the outbuildings, has access to 164 through the 3.95-acre lot to the west, as I mentioned, also owned by the petitioner. However, our ordinances, our land division ordinance, requires that every lot fronts or abuts a public street for at least 66 feet or 45 feet in the cul-de-sac. And so my recommendation is that the 3.95-acre lot that abuts 164 be combined with the remaining 15-acre lot in order to satisfy this requirement. Otherwise, you need a waiver to get around that. In the past, we've talked about these a number of times. We don't allow the creation of new lots, and this would be a new lot because it's being split from the 5 acres to the east to be created without access to a public roadway. So the whole lot, and 20 acres right now has access to Bassler Lane, right?
Right.
So it already has access now, but once you split it, it will no longer have access to a public roadway except through another property. So they are proposing an easement through that 3.95 acre property to the west, but that doesn't necessarily get around the requirements of our ordinance. It would give them access, yes, if they sold the property off in the future, either one, he'd still have access, but he wouldn't have access on a public roadway, which is a requirement without a waiver. I do have a comment in my report about the wetland staking discrepancy, but that's been corrected in an updated submittal by the petitioner and their surveyor. So that's all I have. There's nothing in our ordinances, I just want to make clear that states that cul-de-sac on Bassler Lane needs to be extended. It's a policy matter that has to be discussed. I know the village attorney has some comments in his letter as well. And President Fortner, I'm not sure if you want to read those into the record.
Yes, I was going to point that out if you weren't going to. If you look at the Attorney Macy's comments and Sean and I and our Plan Commission clerk Karen Shu were on the phone with Attorney Macy and he went through this. It's his legal view that temporary cul-de-sacs need to become permanent at some point. And the reason mostly being is they're sitting on private property in part. And the concern is if you don't eventually make them permanent, if you make the existing one permanent, then you're gonna have to buy that property to make it permanent. The idea that it was made temporary, not by our plan, not by this plan commission, but some time ago, when that subdivision was put in, was that road was going to get extended or the cul-de-sac was going to get extended. And to allow further lots around the bulb into the next property over. And so at that point, they tear up the asphalt and the property owners will get their property back.
Right.
Without a road on it,
The property owners you're speaking of, though, are two outlots.
in this case.
But it's
two outlots.
every owner in that subdivision owns a piece of those outlots.
Right.
And so,
Why was that street put in there if they're just outlots?
well, the street was put in here to get at the subject property, is to extend it onto the subject property. I will note that the subject, as I mentioned before, there isn't a lot of development on the east side of this property. There's not a lot of development potential because of all the wetlands, the isolated natural resource areas. So the idea to extend that cul-de-sac onto this property, it's not gonna go very far based on all the environmental
Right.
constraints. That doesn't necessarily mean it shouldn't be extended. It just means that
Well,
there's not a lot of development potential.
if you look at this air photo that we've got, if you extended that cul-de-sac onto the property, I'm not sure there would be enough buildable area on that lot to the south.
The contention I made in the staff report is it appears that there's enough room for a house and a septic system down there. But no, I have not done a.
Be pretty
concept plan.
tight, I
I've
think,
not
but-
seen it. It may be tight.
So that was one thing the attorney pointed out. The other thing he pointed out was, and Sean did mention the easement, in our ordinance that you've got about a public right-of-way, the easement doesn't get you there, it's just an easement.
Right.
The easement doesn't exist. And the simple solution, as Sean pointed out, is you could just combine the property. And,
Right, and if you had a mind later on, if you combine the 3.95 acre property and the 15 acre remainderment property, if that doesn't preclude it from being subdivided in the future. If sometime in the
Right.
future, the western portion of the property could be subdivided according to the zoning and the land use plan. So it doesn't take away any rights of the property owner, it just solves the issue of meeting our subdivision ordinance.
and we mentioned, Sean, and I think and Attorney Macy also points this out too, by stating that most communities require a concept plan for how the parcel could ultimately divide it in the future to discern whether the division, being asked for makes sense.
Yes.
And that's awfully difficult for a plan commission to say, to even give conceptual approval without seeing something like that, unless you know, there are instances where, well, it's not going to be.
The
Well,
only-
if it's not going to be, then the temporary cul-de-sac needs to be
Right.
dis-
That needs to be finalized.
finalized one way or the other,
Some way or the other.
right?
The only point I'll make about the concept plan is that, again, the east side of the property, there's not a lot of development potential over there. So if it's one lot or two lots, if it's a cul-de-sac or not, there's not a lot of options for development on the east side. The west side of the property has more development options down the road potentially.
Even there, aren't there a lot of slopes on that property?
There are some, but, you know, there's potential for development. The other thing about that, though, is that it does access a state highway. And so any development or any traffic or new lots that are put on a state highway would have to have approval from DOT. If new lots are created that would access 164.
Yeah, and they've said that they will not allow any, by the way.
They won't allow any new lots?
I've been down that road before.
Sure, so, okay, so then what you're proposing then is one 15-acre lot, or potentially combined with a 3.95-acre parcel, so it could be one 19-acre lot, and then a 5-acre lot on the east, and is that the ultimate build-out, is what you're proposing?
Did you say the county won't, or the state won't allow
State
access there?
won't. About 12 years ago, we were looking at subdividing that entire area.
Yeah,
Town Realty, their piece to the north, Paul Fick House, and my piece, joining together. And we had proceeded quite a ways down the road. The plan at that time actually was for me to become part of Big Bend and not try to work through Vernon. And at the last minute, as it turns out very wisely, town said, we're gonna put a cap on this for a while. We don't like the looks of the economy coming up. And they were dead right. Well, without them, Paul and I could not continue, so it stopped right there. I've got, you know, drawings and everything of subdividing the whole area with a road that would have had to come in and go up there, and for a person to do it by themselves would be just ridiculously expensive.
yeah.
And the lots, because of the sloping, because of the rock in the woods, which is environmental corridor, there's additional requirements put on it too. It just is not economically feasible unless you're gonna add another 20 lots with it, over which you can defer the cost, and they're not there.
Yeah, the isolated natural resource area is a good point. Almost the entire property is in the isolated natural resource area, besides this little strip on the east side. And so typically, there's already an existing home and existing buildings there, and so that would severely limit any development of that property anyhow.
I guess I would see no need for a conceptual plan, development plan, then at this point.
If Bassler Lane was brought in from the east, and let's say it's skirted north to meet that property, as you mentioned, to the north, it would basically take away any development potential on this property in any capacity, because the roadway and the right-of-way would take up any area not in the isolated natural resource area. So there's no way Bassler Lane is gonna come onto this property and meet up with the property to the north and leave any development potential at all on the subject property. So the question remains, what to do with the temporary cul-de-sac.
And you only want that 1 5-acre parcel there.
Yeah, the intent is for us to build on that 5-acre parcel and sell off the other 20 acres, rough numbers.
Sell
I
off the
don't
other
know.
20 acres, so you're gonna combine the 3.95 into it, and then sell that 20 acres plus the home that's there, right?
Yeah, the home and the barn, you probably can
Right,
see there.
in the buildings, yeah.
Yeah.
Does that come in and off of Bassler Lane, or does that come in and off of 164?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your
The
question.
the driveway to the home and the buildings now.
164.
Now, comes
Yeah.
off of 160.
64, right.
follows that
So
easement.
that's why the 3.9 or whatever it is would have to be included with the 15 to put it back up to about 20.
Right, has to.
And as I said, then the plan is for us to come in off of Bassler Lane, building a small house and outbuilding there. Yeah. Yes, right.
So we still have the temporary cul-de-sac issue. If we didn't have that, this would.
It'd be
might an
no-brainer.
Easier, yeah. The only good news is it's sitting on, the private property is sitting on his outlots.
It's outlots, so nobody, it's not a huge concern like it's a single-family home and their yard is being used for a public
for a
right-of-way.
road, yeah.
I really don't see a problem with that.
Well, but if if Vernon is forced to acquire that land off the outlets, that could get very messy and expensive. I'm not sure why Vernon would want to have that expense. That's why it's labeled as temporary. So it wouldn't be our expense. That's what I'm concerned about. It will never be fixed. It'll never become permanent.
Nobody uses it, do they?
Probably not many people use
Mr.
it.
Herman
There's,
would use it.
there's no reason, yeah, he would use it,
I'm the
but,
only one that I think uses it.
but now it's, nobody uses it because it doesn't go anywhere. There's no houses on it.
Is this the same thing as if I had Green Hill Drive? That's 11 acre parcel, then a line off the
Could be.
cul-de-sac? What house? What one?
Oh, that was a little different. So we looked at a conceptual plan for, the petitioner's name was Luco Lent, joint petition, and that was to combine two parcels. He had two properties, he wanted to build right in the middle of them. And there was some environmental corridor issues that he had to establish a land disturbance area, and so we allowed him to combine two parcels and that's all he wanted to do with the property. And we didn't require him to extend that cul-de-sac, that temporary cul-de-sac, because all he wanted to do was do one home and be done with it.
Can we get the,
But there was still development of potential in there afterwards.
There was potential for future development if he changed his mind, yes.
Here, this lot might prohibit that going forward, do you think, or Sean?
There's no development potential here except a maximum of 2 lots.
2 lots, so, but it's the second lot that will pay for the bulb coming across the property line,
It certainly could.
right?
that would be one of my conditions on the division here. If a second lot were to be developed, then they would have to extend that, but no further divisions without extending that.
But would a second lot be possible? It's hard to say.
Depends where the
without-
house is gonna go.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's hard to say without a little more detail,
Well,
whether that would happen, because if what's approved in practicality, that what you're saying would never happen, well then.
So be it.
Then it'll never happen, so then we'll never solve the problem.
Is it possible to approach the property owners of these outlots and get a dedication to the village of that little piece of land there
That would solve it too, wouldn't it?
on
That would
each
solve
side?
it. That would
Because
solve it.
then it would become a permanent cul-de-sac.
Correct,
Right?
right.
At whose expense? Because they'd have to draw up the survey documents and all that stuff. Someone would have to
Those
pay.
are the questions that keep coming through my head as you
Someone-
brought up, Charlie. Who's gonna pay for it?
Right. And the whole idea with the temporary cul-de-sacs is the next developer pays for it.
Right.
Right, because the first developer put it there in the first place
Well-
at a great expense, you know, including the bulb.
Probably at the town's expense.
But it's
probably,
impractical.
Or
Yeah.
retired, right.
In this case, it's impractical for the next developer to extend it.
Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I
would
think if
so.
you get 2 lots, you can use 1 lot to pay for it. It wouldn't go very far, it'd just go over the property line,
By 66 feet.
66 feet,
Well, more than that,
Or more,
because the
72,
bulb
is
is,
it?
yeah, the bulb is bigger than that,
Yeah.
right.
and the right of way.
it would take a substantial amount of his buildable area, I think, there off of it, but.
It also looks like it might extend, depending a little bit, into the isolated natural resource area. It's hard to tell if it would affect the wetland at all, but certainly the isolated natural resource area would be slightly impacted.
Do you have the absolute latest drawing there, Sean?
I do.
Yeah, it's difficult to picture
Is
exactly wherever
Bassler,
it is. And it might be
Yeah.
cheaper to get it, it might be cheaper just to make it permanent, but somebody
Yeah,
would
there's
have
a
to pay for the
surveying?
surveying, get the dedicated easement, and there might be a cost to that, to the subdivision owners, might be, maybe not. And I don't know what other costs there would be, but I'm sure there's gonna be some.
Could you pursue a reaction from those owners?
Do they have an association or anything, or? they-
Yeah, it's gotta be the associate, so,
The outlots are owned by the association.
and this is a association of which one, Terrace Drive? Okay. Not the new one, the old Vernon one from the early eighties, I think, is that right? I don't.
You know, a question on that, well, two. You know, the only way I could see practically getting two lots in that area, in that 5 acres, would be sometime in the future, and I hope I live that long, I would expect the land to the north of me to be developed. And that would be the only practical way to come in there to service those lots, number one. Number two, of the outbuilding, outlot 3, you know, that in essence consists of a big, what do you call it, reservoir pond. And I probably should have, because I don't know what I was doing. I didn't know then, and I don't know now. But when they put that pond in, it flows through my property, which is the first part of the wetland, that the first survey that, Sewer Pack's wetland always showed it, but the first survey done didn't show it. And actually Sean and I had to go back to them and do some more surveying to show that that drainage from that drainage pond goes right through my property. And at the time that it was being done, I was approached, actually Schwabi's the one who did it, and asked if I had any objections, and I said, no, not really. I guess I don't see any usage of that land for me. Well, now it becomes one.
Right. Now it becomes one.
So I guess I'm not convinced, based on the survey that was submitted, the most recent updated survey, that the extension of Vassar Lane cul-de-sac hole, if it just came directly west onto the property, that it wouldn't impact the wetlands. I think you may have to fill some of the wetlands just west of Vassar Lane, based on the last survey that was submitted.
I know.
How many feet from the wetlands to the property line there?
Well, based on the survey, I don't know.
Well, I can tell you, and again, I'm really, really disappointed with the people that did the survey. But I extrapolated that number you're asking for, based upon this drawing. And it's only about 65 feet. I went out there with a tape and measured that 65 feet, and it measures at 120 feet. So the numbers here aren't, and
You say the numbers are, the survey's not accurate?
no, hell no. And if you look, the reason I did it is because if you look at, and Sean, you're probably, you and Karen are probably the only one who saw this, the drawing that the Sewer Pack did, you can say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. And yes, I believe Sewer Pack's is correct. This is not.
Well, the sewer tax is correct. The wetland boundary is maybe far enough back to the put a cul-de-sac, but it's gonna be tight. It's gonna be real tight with slopes and grading and everything else. Probably, certainly this isolated natural resource area will be impacted, and potentially parts of the wetland will have to be filled in the cul-de-sac zone. Can you turn on the layer of environmental? And this isn't actually accurate. So there's the wetland. It actually extends further north than that, but
How current is that?
that's not accurate. And so in your packets, you have the survey and the wetland staking. That's the best we have. It's hard to tell exactly what would be impacted, but there's certainly a possibility that it would impact the isolated natural resource area well.
Property to the north is Town Realty, right? Silver?
No, directly to the north is Baltic House,
Oh, okay, so Silver is, or Town Realty is north of that.
correct.
But they,
Yeah.
But there's roads back there, right?
Oh, yeah, that's the fourth guy. He kept going by himself.
well, it's platted, I don't think, no.
That's Vic House. Right, from the flat from the north. Bachelor Lane is not gonna ever go up there, Sean, is it?
No.
Not through, if it goes through the subject property we're talking about, it doesn't leave any development potential of this property. So why would it go through this property? Unless you bought it outright, just to get access through the north. If the developer to the north
Right,
wanted
I see what
this
you're saying.
to come through, you could buy 5 acres on the east side or whatever it is, and bring the road north. But the petitioner has no incentive to bring that road
North.
through his property line, because it takes away all the development potential, and it's hundreds of feet of road for no purpose, except to
Right.
get to the north property.
Right.
Now, if you look at the overhead up there, can you zoom in a little bit on that property to the north? Yeah, you can see, no, well, one step. Those two roads that connect in, that plat, those two roads that connect in would probably connect to each other.
To loop around,
Loop around, right.
yeah.
So, there's potential there for a connection.
Yeah.
Right, that's Big Bend, but I'm just saying, they could finish that development pattern without
Right.
any use of this property.
Right.
Without Bachelor Road at all, or Mr. Herman's property for that matter.
Right.
Should have traded the water drainage for the right-of-way easement and the
Yeah,
temporary
should've.
bulb and been done. We'd be done right now, probably.
I should have.
That's the only hangup I see. Sean,
It is, that's the issue, is that temporary cul-de-sac intended to be extended. The fact that there's pavement on private property that's used by the public, probably hardly used because that
Right.
cul-de-sac isn't used for any purpose, but it's dangling out there as a potential problem down the line, that it was never extended and will never be extended.
Why would it be a problem in the future?
Only the fact that if the subdivision to the east may one day say, hey, plat says this is to be extended, if the property to the west is to be developed, it's gotta be extended by the developer on the west, and this would count as development, it's creating a lot. And so they're allowing a public road and public access to that road, and it's not dedicated right away, it's on private property. I don't know what the ramification is long-term, in terms of what they would expect from that, but it's an issue potentially. And that was Attorney Macy's comment mostly, is that it's a potential liability.
Why are these two outlets there? Are they not buildable, or?
The
One's-
south
one's a
the south
drainage
one is a
easement.
pond, I don't know about the north one.
The north one takes all the water coming up from the north section and.
So, it treats the water before it goes to the
Yeah,
pond?
there's a cross culvert that goes through.
Oh, I see.
Well, sure, it's a way to get, it's a way to get at the pond to the south, because that pond wouldn't have any access.
Drainage easement that goes right behind those houses up there.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
No, no,
It's
no,
right
no.
behind that, it's actually right behind those houses, 3 or 4.
On their properties.
Right there, yeah, on their property, goes down to there. And there's a cross-
Well, half on their property, half on mine.
How does it get to the pond and off
I think
the,
there's a cross culvert, if I'm not mistaken. Part of that pond picks up surface water coming off that drainage easement. And then, if you remember this one, Dan, this is the first one we ever had, stormwater management, underground stormwater
Yeah,
management.
yeah.
So that's where all that water comes through. It picks up all those other homes internally there.
I guess, on the positive side, if it was left as a temporary cul-de-sac, never converted to permanent, nobody drives down it, nobody uses it, it doesn't impact single-family homes, it's just outlots. Whether or not the subdivision themselves, the owners would have an issue with it, it seems like a very minor issue, because it doesn't impact homes directly, and no one's using the road. But it's, oh, I'm sure. Oh, maybe not, probably not a priority, yeah.
I guess I would be in favor of leaving it the way it is.
Well, it's only conceptual. I'd rather have the problem cleaned up one way or the other. Cleaned up, though.
Cleaned up meaning either the cul-de-sac extended or
It's
or
permanent.
dedicated right of way
Yeah.
on that property
Make
to
it permanent
the town.
and get the, get the property, the outlot owners to dedicate it.
The plat might have to be revised because the plat shows it as temporary to be extended.
So that would solve the issue going forward. And it'd be a cheaper, it seems to me it could very well be cheaper than.
Cheaper than building a cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
Sure.
even a bulb just across the property line, like you
Yeah,
said.
and again, our official map doesn't show the extension of that cul-de-sac, so it's not something that we're pushing to
Right.
happen for the sake of doing it.
Right, I don't really, I could stop there right now. I don't know why it was temporary in the first place, but other than with some plan
Right.
into the future.
So to modify the subdivision plat, if the association agreed to do that, they'd have to agree to it because it's
Yes.
their property, it's their,
Right.
their plat. The question is then, we don't care who pays for it,
So long as it's not Vernon.
so as long as it's not the Village of Vernon.
Why would they want to do it?
They would not want to pay for it. Unless to say, hey, unless they say, well, we don't want any development over there, one house might be okay. We like the cul-de-sac right where it is, we'd rather it didn't get extended to some other development that feeds back into our,
Right. They don't want to extend it to the north, up into Fickhouse property. This is
Right.
a way to permanently shut future development down.
that,
If I'm
yeah.
on the subdivision board, I would say, yeah, that's what we want.
But Fickhouse property would connect to the north and eventually feed back into the subdivision anyways.
I don't know about that.
Doesn't it connect?
I think it goes over to you, doesn't it?
Both, a little both,
A little both.
yeah. So it connects to you, but it also connects to the subdivision.
Where does it connect? That's you.
Yeah, and then to the south, right there.
There's Terrace
Yep.
right there.
Yep,
So there must be another temporary cul-de-sac there,
there is.
right? Your
To the
cursor
right,
goes
right to the right.
flipping right by it all the time.
To the right,
No,
To the
to the right. In
Right.
Vernon.
just to your right, where you were.
Right
Yeah,
there.
right there, right there.
Yeah,
It's a temporary cul-de-sac there.
and how come that was, well, it's not developed yet to the north, huh?
It's platted, the plat has obviously been recorded because it's showing up, but not developed.
And that doesn't connect there.
Is that Harvest View?
I don't know. Click on one of the lots. Now click on the link to the tax file.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We have a,
Harvest View.
Is
we have
it?
a developer's agreement on that, yeah. A letter of credit.
Really?
Yeah, they.
How long ago was that
Oh,
planted?
it's been extended for years. It's just not economically feasible for them to develop that.
So that's in Vernon there.
It's in Big Bend. But we have a developer's agreement for this.
For
For
that.
that connection.
So when they do that, though,
Oh, that's how we make sure it happens.
it's to our spec, on our side.
Right.
Wait, you know, if I may, I'm still very confused on this. How far does the building have to be from the wetlands?
Building has to be 75 feet from the wetlands.
And how far from the lot line?
From the road right away, 50 feet. From the lot line, I believe it's 30 feet in the zoning district.
Although we have granted variances.
Only in the case of existing lots that didn't have any other option. Right.
Right.
Yeah, you're talking about the one.
You're talking about the
The one
one
on
that
Prairie
was just done.
Side.
So I don't, yeah, it's gonna be very important to know exactly where the wetland line is based on required 75-foot setback, and so, it looks like it may be possible, based on the sewer pack drawing, to have a 75-foot setback and still get a house in there, but it remains to be seen. I mean, you may wanna, if that's where you wanna put the house, you may wanna lay it out to know exactly where it's gonna end up before you do the CSM and everything else. There might be more room to the north, further
There's a
north.
lot of rooms in the north.
So you could always get a house up there, there's no wetlands impacted. As long as you're not in the isolated natural resource area, you don't have to be set back from it, just not in the wetland. And then 30 feet from the lot line, so,
Well, that entire area going north
right,
is scrub.
right.
Actually, it was a cornfield when I bought the land 30 years ago.
So if you can't squeeze the house in the south, you could potentially get it north. You could get it north. So where do we end up on the cul-de-sac?
You gotta start with the association.
More information, sounds like. Fred, thoughts?
No, I go along with that cul-de-sac.
Right. You'd like to see the problem solved?
Yep.
So, Jim?
Oh, yeah, I think we should make it, that it should be a permanent,
If we can get there,
right.
would make
If
the
we
most
can
sense.
get the association to dedicate it,
And the costs are gonna be they're not gonna wanna pay the cost. Costs
No.
will be imposed on Mr. Herman, but he'd get his subdivision.
So, yeah, it would require revising the plat in order to remove the temporary cul-de-sac, make it a permanent cul-de-sac, change the notes on there.
The plat meaning
The Sunset Glen subdivision plat.
It's gotta be.
what, that one, or wouldn't it be Terrace?
I think this is this not called Sunset?
That
Glen?
note that you read on the Sunset Glen, I don't know how they can write that note if this is in Vernon. The Sunset Glen is in Big Bend, isn't it?
No.
Harvest View is in Big Bend.
Harvest View.
You're talking about this.
The big subdivision to the east, yeah.
Yeah, this.
Click on one of the lots once. Now click on link to tax file. I just want to see the name of the subdivision. Sunset Glen.
That's Vernon.
Lot 5, undivided, outlaw 1, Sunset Glen, yes, Sunset Glen.
Okay.
So the plat for
So it's in
Sunset,
Sunset Glens, not Terrace.
right.
Okay.
Terrace Park is one of the roads in there, but.
Yeah,
So the plat for Sunset Glen would need to be modified to make it a permanent cul-de-sac and change the right-of-way configuration, dedicating some of the land and the outlots to right-of-way.
Do you have any anticipated cost on that?
I was just gonna say, but they do a
Exactly what I was thinking.
I don't know.
fucking big box.
Might have to look into that.
Yes.
Can you just zoom out on that bulb?
You want on the bulb?
So, we have a 66-foot road right away on Vassar, that, why, the 12 is very small compared to, what is our minimum diameter, 120 up there?
You think it's not big enough to be a permanent cul-de-sac?
Yeah, it's not big enough. So I think the diameter is 120.
Diameter with a rough,
Wouldn't it be easier to just vacate the sections that are, it looks like you got maybe on a 66-foot road right away there, you only got maybe 5 feet on one side and 15.
oh, to just tear off the pavement and replant the grass, and everything's in the right of way. And this Vassar Lane only will serve one property to the west and then access to the stormwater lots. So,
Does that have an effect on the plat though?
well, what the plat says is that it's temporary, and that's all, and that's all it says.
Are you sure?
Well, and it says development of the partial to the west would require that to be extended, but I don't know if, I guess I just don't know off the top of my head if that could be done without modifying the plat.
Well, I think Vince's idea is very good, but I'm the person who knows nothing about this, but I would expect the fire department to raise hell because they can't turn a fire truck around them
Right.
without that size cul-de-sac.
Why would a fire truck be down there?
Right, yeah,
I
well,
don't know.
Well, your wood could start on fire.
You never know.
Yeah, it's not very far to back
but
up
it's not that
either,
far
right?
to go, yeah.
Vince, would you have an idea of cost of that?
No.
No, I'm just looking for an alternative, there's not really a,
Thank
it
you.
doesn't meet our definition of a cul-de-sac, it's like a cul-de-sac.
Well, I'm looking right now.
I mean, the cost, if we did, I mean, that would, obviously would have to be modified. I think that's gonna be cost prohibitive.
Really, just to cut those corners off?
Do we have any legal authority to put that cost on Mr. Herman, though?
Well, I'm waiting for Sean's rough idea of paying for redrawing the plot lines. And if that's too high, I'm gonna just give up right now.
I don't know, I can't tell you what that would be. You'd have to
What would
talk
be
to
your
you'd have to
wildest
talk to
guess?
your surveyor would tell you that. Same guys you had do the survey could give you some insight on that.
Sure.
And then I could pull up the plat and see what the plat language says. In the approved plat.
You know, there's a decision,
So what we require for a rural cross-section is 66-foot radius, so 132 feet. of pavement.
Double the right-of-way.
Yeah, for the actual pavement,
Could we waive that, Sean?
yes.
Because there's no home,
You
or
can-
only
you-
one
You
home
can
on it?
waive anything in the subdivision ordinance. That's like, what's it, like 80 feet maybe?
How much room do we need to turn a snowplow around there?
That distance tool never works right, does it?
Vince can get it to work.
I always say
I don't think he turns around right now. He
I was gonna say, I don't
pushes it
remember
off
them.
until a little bit and backs out.
Do they powder, Daryl?
Yeah, they push right down and push it off at the
They
end.
don't, but they don't make them,
Right,
yeah.
How is that, Karen?
I'll bet.
They back out, so we don't even need room to turn around. We can just cut that pavement off there.
It'd basically be a driveway then.
Right, so that'd be an alternative. Cut the pavement, provide a waiver, so it's, it'll have to be something, there has to be something recorded. There has to be something recorded. What that is, I don't
I
know.
was gonna pull up the plat tomorrow, and see what I could find in the plat.
Well, it doesn't say much about it, like I said, I've looked at it a bunch of times now. It just notes it as a temporary cul-de-sac with a note on the last page or so that says it's to be extended when the property to the west is developed at the expense of developer. So,
So you'd have to remove the note, remove the temporary part of it, revert the land back to the homeowners association somehow. Or maybe it's, you don't have to do
No,
anything.
there's
Well,
no
if we
land.
just
Just
trim
own it.
off the pavement, you
Yeah,
wouldn't
they just
revert.
own it and that's that. They already own it, so they're not transferring anything.
Right. We've got plenty of those that don't even have a temporary cul-de-sac on the end.
Yeah, developed way back when.
You know, we'll get into that in the next one. but-
Just trying to fix something, if we can. And this sounds like maybe we could fix it somehow. Might be some expense.
So,
Yeah.
I guess maybe what I'm hearing is that it needs to be fixed one way or the other. It doesn't have to necessarily be extended on the property,
Right,
but the plat has to be adjusted to make either option legal, whether it's trimming off the bulb and just having it a straightaway, or making it a permanent cul-de-sac with right-of-way dedicated around it from the outlets, one of the two.
Right.
right. And figure out if we need to waive
And
anything
there's
like the width.
probably a waiver required either way,
Right,
based on either doesn't have the right size bulb or doesn't have a bulb at all.
yeah, whichever. Whichever way you want to
Whichever
think
would
about
be
it.
great.
It's no longer gonna look like a bulb, so. Maybe talk to John and see how they plow it, and how they would plow it afterwards, if they clipped it. With one lot, would we limit the subdivision? You would say no further lots off of Bachelor Lane at that point?
Yes, for certain, the 5 acre property that's created would say no additional land divisions.
Unless
No.
that were extended into a cul-de-sac. If possible.
Unless the road's extended on the property.
Right.
Right. In the meantime, that would cover all the bases then. It'd fix it.
Yeah, but don't count on from me, because depending upon what it's gonna cost to redraw those plot lines, and I'm inferring that it's gonna be enough to make me just forget the whole damn thing.
We'll have to find that out, I guess.
Right. Seems to me we could get an estimate. Somebody should get an estimate. I don't know if it's up to Sean or Vernon to do that, but somebody can get an estimate.
Well, Sean suggested I call Tim Lutz and see what he says.
Call Lynch and
And Lynch.
Associates and ask them what their opinion on revising that plat would take, to change some notes and change some, it's still gotta go through the process, right? And we're not changing anything except for the.
No lot is being changed on the plot.
No lots being,
No,
well, only the outlots might be changed, depending. if-
Slightly, yeah, depending
if
on which way you
It's made into a
go.
permanent cul-de-sac or
Right.
not.
The outlights would, yes, the only changes to any lot would be on those two outlots, if necessary. But otherwise, the rest of the plat wouldn't, and a note on the plat would have to change. Then I guess the legal question is, who needs to sign off on that? Vernon obviously, but does the homeowners association have to sign off on that too?
They'd certainly have to approve the changes to the plat, yes.
Yeah, I would think so.
Is that temporary cul-de-sac listed on the plat?
They would need, it is.
It is?
They would actually need to be the petitioner to revise the plat. So you could, your name could be on the application too as the applicant, but they need to sign off the applications and everything else because we're changing their plat.
Right.
They need to sign that. Someone from the association. The president or whoever.
Right, probably president with the attestation by the secretary or something.
Can we find out who that is?
I bet they don't even have one, but I can find out.
Does that have to be listed with the county? When they have those, no,
If they have, if there's an active HOA, the Register of Deeds has that, but there's not a publication or, I'll find out.
Mr. Herman, what's your timing on all this? When would you like to start building?
Not really, this started over a year ago. And then they put land delineate, well, You asked Sewer Pack to do it, and Sewer Pack did it, but, and they were gonna do it about a year ago right now. And then winter arrived too early, so it was delayed until spring. And then spring arrived too late and too wet, so it was delayed until, when did they do it? June? So it's, you know, no really rush.
Well, we could table it, get this additional information, maybe get a better diagram of where where the lot is and where the environmental is, kind of, so that the house could be configured, so we could see, you know,
Is there room for
obviously
the
it's conceptual, so it
Right.
doesn't have to be
It
exact.
doesn't have to be
but-
perfect, but to show that you
Yeah.
could get maybe a 30 by 40 footprint of a house or something on there with a garage and.
Whether it's on the north side of or south side. Because that would drive how that's written too. I mean, if the home's gonna be on the north side, bachelor's done. There's no gonna be extension anywhere, ever. If it's on the south side, maybe you could go north with bachelor. Not that that's what you wanna do or intend to do. I think it's highly unlikely that it would ever be extended personally, but who knows, right?
So the bottom line is investigate what it would take to do the subdivision plat changes. And the options are to either dedicate the bulb as a permanent
Right.
or to shave off the
Flip it.
pavement and just have it a straight shot through.
Determine the costs.
Right. It's always a money issue, always a cost issue, always. Consensus on that, so we need a motion to table it, or we'll just take no action with direct, and you know where to go, Sean?
Well, I'm not doing the investigation, I mean, that's,
Right.
I wasn't planning on it. I don't, it's a cost issue, right? It's basically figuring out what it would take from a surveyor, and someone's gotta talk to the association to see if they'd even be
Right.
amenable to modifying that. Okay.
I don't know if we have room to bring it back next month or not, but we'll see where we're at.
Right now, we only have two applications in. Another one's
Just to keep you going.
Right.
we table until,
Until we have more information.
yeah, right.
Table more information. In the meantime, when we get the information, you can work with Mr. Herman about, you know, as you said, you may say, dollars doesn't make any sense. You gotta figure something else out.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
that's what I'm
You're afraid of that, but we
very
gotta look in
concerned
the,
with right now.
we gotta look and see.
Yeah.
The consensus is the table?
Consensus is the table. Yes, I see all heads nodding in affirmative.
Got it. Mr. Herman will be in contact with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Okay. Next up, we've got another conceptual certified survey map request by, the owner, property owners are the Briggs, and the petitioner is Mr. Price. So everyone's here, it looks like, yes, no? Yes, you are,
Rich Price.
you're Rich Price, okay, if you could state your name and address for the record.
It's Richard Price, S26W29255, German Court, Waukesha.
Okay, so this is a conceptual review of a land division of the Briggs property into two lots, a 10.16 acre lot at the end of Applin Lane, as I say that right? And an approximate 8.97 acre lot on Hillview that includes existing home located at S78W26840 Hillview Drive. Sean, you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure, so this is a 18.92 acre property, it's zoned A5 mini farm. The future land use is rural residential. Essentially what that means is you can do 5 acre lots on the property up to, so essentially there's a home on the property now that has access to Hillview Drive. And so what they're asking to do is to split that home off on the south to create a 9.39 acre parcel, or 8.97 excluding the right-of-way on Hillview. And then on the north, create a 10.16 acre parcel that would have access from Applin Lane. And so that all works with the zoning and the future land use and everything else, but we essentially have the same or very similar issue to the last one, and that Applin Lane is a temporary cul-de-sac. And the idea is to continue it through the property to the east and the north. The village's official map actually shows it connecting to the private road further east. It shows it connecting to the just east of the property and then going north along that private driveway, further north, ultimately up to Mount Everest Road. And so my comment with regard to the official map and the future roadway is that even though the official map shows the connection to the east and the connection further north, it's debatable, in my opinion, as to make those connections in the future. There's not a lot of potentially developable property to the east or the north. There's environmental concerns and constraints to the north. A lot of this property is already developed. To create that big of a road network for one or two lots isn't feasible. It would have to connect and go across existing developed property in some locations. There really isn't even room to move that roadway north along that private roadway based on existing development that's occurred in the area as well. So whether or not Apple Lane gets extended is questionable. The other issue with Apple Lane is that the existing cul-de-sac length is about 1,130 feet from the intersection of Hillview and Apple Lane up to the center of the bulb. And so we have a limit of 600 feet on our cul-de-sac unless it's extended through a waiver to a maximum of 1,200 feet. And so in order to reach that 1,200, in order to get onto the property, the bulb to be brought on the property, we'd be exceeding the bulb, the length by, I don't know, I took some measurements and it's not perfect, but it looks like about at least 35 feet would be in excess of the cul-de-sac limit in general. So if you can't connect the roadway to the existing road network to the east and north because of existing development and lack of future development, and you can't extend the bulb onto the property itself because you'd be exceeding the cul-de-sac length, it's kind of a dilemma here in terms of the property. I know Attorney Macy raised the question of, well, in one section of our ordinance, we allow waivers for the cul-de-sac. There's a very specific section. It talks about the board can waive it up to 1,200 feet in that particular section. But there's also another general section in the land division ordinance that talks about a plan commission recommendation and a board waiver for anything. And so the question is, could we waive the cul-de-sac length in this case based on that general section, or do we have to follow the specific cul-de-sac language? And that hasn't been resolved yet. It was a question that the attorney brought up, and he said more research might need to be done in terms of whether or not we could make a general waiver, even though there's specific language for cul-de-sac bulb or cul-de-sac length waivers. So I think that's all I have. The only other thing I would mention is at the very end of my report. It says, in any case, we should evaluate the official map in this area in terms of potential changes. If we don't think that Apple Lane is going to connect to the east to that private road or go further up to the north, then the official map should be updated to reflect that. We have questions?
So on this one, we've got yet another temporary cul-de-sac that
Yes.
needs to be fixed. This one, well, you heard the earlier discussion, so maybe that'll be part of this discussion. This one is further complicated in the sense that we've got some issues with our ordinance, whether in the waiver process, and whether our ordinances need to be amended to go past 1,200 feet.
That is another option. That
That's
would
a-
be another option, is to amend the subdivision ordinance to allow exceptions beyond 1,200 feet.
Right. And we've got the road extension, and I don't know how these roads get drawn on these maps, official maps in the first place, and who thought of this network of roads?
It was back in 96, 95, when the county actually got a bug in their ear that they wanted to say, hey, there is potential that these roads may connect, and then they would put potential connected roads.
But they couldn't have looked at
No.
They need to look at environmental, the topography, they gotta look at,
Topography, well, we didn't have a mapping system the way they do now, so they didn't know about, they didn't look at environmental source, they didn't look at C1s. You know, so they were making these assumptions based on limited data.
Yeah, so the road goes through an environmental corridor to the north. To the east, it goes through just to the middle of a parcel to connect to a private road. And so it's a lot of road for, again, I mentioned there's not a lot of development potential in this area based on zoning and future land use.
There's quite a slope there
and
too,
development plan,
east,
and a
isn't
slope
it?
as well. Karen, there was another piece that was submitted by one of the neighbors as well.
it's the person with the long driveway, right?
Right, it's, I think I put the.
Yeah, oh yeah, I have
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah.
From Ted,
So, and we just got this
There's Ted.
yeah.
today. What is the gist of this?
We just wanted to give history. Ted, didn't you say that there are some areas that are real wet and?
Yes, so the back of the property dumps into my lot.
The north part of the
Okay, we gotta
property?
get it.
Yes, so where it slopes down. During the wintertime, when snowpack melts, it's not uncommon for my driveway to be almost completely flooded before it actually gets through a 12-inch drain that goes under my driveway, through where my leach field is, and then into the environmental corridor. So, the schmelzers who live inside, who are my neighbors, who are almost completely in the environmental corridor, have mentioned that, during the snow or the springtime, they have rapids actually running through their backyard. So the concern is future development of that property, the amount of runoff or potential runoff that could occur due to building structures and pavement.
So the point I would make to runoff is that it's Waukesha County who handles stormwater runoff and permitting regarding stormwater. And so one house on this property would probably not trigger stormwater review by Waukesha County. It's based on total impervious surface and what's being proposed. But 2 or 3 homes might,
So it impacts 2 homes.
no, I mean, if creating two new lots, for instance. 2 new homes or 3 new homes would probably trigger stormwater review by Waukesha County, but the creation of 1 new home probably will not.
Including potential street or cul-de-sac?
Yes, if the cul-de-sac was extended and the street was extended, that impervious surface would require thinking for stormwater management and review. So, in the case, if it wouldn't be extended and we wouldn't require extension of the cul-de-sac for whatever reason, maybe it's made into a permanent cul-de-sac, similar to the other one, and it's only 1 new home that's placed on this, it probably would not trigger any stormwater review.
So I think also the potential of the location of where the home is at. So if you look at the topography of the property that's in question, the upper section is very high where water could potentially stay up there and have a longer distance to travel versus if the home was closer to maybe the slope section where the potential runoff could be increased and flood my area.
Okay, thank you.
So it's the same kind of questions on the temporary cul-de-sac that we just went through with Mr. Herman, the same things here, and the same, splitting it, and does that affect potential future development? What happens to the temporary cul-de-sac? And, I agree with you on the road extension. I think that's gonna be a pretty much of a.
Connecting to to the other road.
Right. Dan,
Guess I'd like to hear from Mr. Price and see what his intentions are.
okay,
I'd like to build my home there. 3,000 square foot ranch, 3 or 4 car attached garage with a basement under it, and hopefully not have an outbuilding on it.
So I say the last part.
Not, hopefully not to have to need an outbuilding on it.
Is this your home that's depicted on the,
Kinda sorta, I think it's gonna go to the north just a little bit, but along that east property line.
what is this black line around the house?
Just like a envelope, a building envelope.
We originally talked about the property and about location of the house, and so you can see that the future road is dotted in there as potential, so we were talking about locating the home just north of that. If this was approved without the cul-de-sac needing to be extended, it would be located in such a place that the road could be extended in the future, if that was a requirement of the plan commission, and so that's kind of what he's showing. Also, you could develop, because of the density of the property, it might be possible to create one more lot, north of that extension as well, based on, if he's got 10 plus acres, he could split into 2 5-acre lots if he wanted.
That could be a future idea for the next person, but
Not on your plans?
not in my plans.
Is it feasible to extend that Elpin Lane to the east, with
Well-
the contours that, I see on there? Looks like it kind of falls off a cliff there.
It goes way up and then way down, or I'm sorry, it goes up, it goes down to a ravine and then it comes back up, right? So it dips quite a bit,
Right at the lot line there, right?
right, it
Just
goes,
before the lot line.
it goes all the way down to the east side of the property.
And it crosses another property, right? That little strip of land?
You're talking about this up here, Cory?
It's my driveway.
Yeah,
your
the
driveway,
there's a,
right?
there's a,
That's
there's
his
a,
driveway.
No.
there's an easement across the northeast corner.
But that's actually owned by you, that strip of land, right?
Owned by me and also empties into the environment, a primary environmental corridor.
Over here?
The northeast
This small
corner,
box right there is mine.
the very northeast
And then
corner.
that long driveway that curves all the way around.
Yeah, there's a little angled cut there at the northeast.
So we got that strip of land with the driveway, and plus we have the private road that goes in there.
It's my driveway.
Right.
No, I mean to the east of that.
Yeah, further east is there's a private road that runs north and south.
Look at how they access this property.
There's an easement there.
Yeah,
Yeah, clearly the area to the north and the east, the planning that went into the creation of those lots and those roads was not given a ton of thought, and so that's part of the problem of not being able to connect to them now.
Well, I'm looking at Applin Lane there in the temporary cul-de-sac, the bulb, it looks like it is on private property, and there's a home there to the south, is that right, Sean?
And to the north.
And to the north, right?
correct, right.
So unlike the previous, Mr. Herman, dealing with 2 outlets, we've got 2 homeowners.
Right.
Over here.
Yep.
Yep.
Is there any reason why from the end of the bulb straight east, why that couldn't just be a driveway?
The only reason is that it's a temporary cul-de-sac and was intended to be extended at some point in the future. And as President Fortner mentioned, there's currently pavement on private residential lots that is used by, is usable by the public. Same situation as the other one, except that was outlots. This is actual houses that has includes pavement on their actual lots.
Right, more risk.
So I talked to Jerry on the north of the bulb. And what he says and what he may put in writing may be 2 different things. But he said he'd be fine with that staying a temp court forever, so long there's no additional development behind his home.
Besides your one?
Right. And for the most part, the 15 members in that HOA are supportive of one home going back there versus the original plan that the village had with a small development and potentially 5 lots.
There was a
So-
proposal for that?
Well, I was told that master plan showed more development happening in there than just the one home that I proposed to build.
That may be, I'm not familiar with that, but under current zoning and future land use plan, there's only potential for 3 total lots, including the existing home.
So 2 more is what you're saying.
Falcon's view of division,
Yes.
for Falcon's view, they were proposing to come onto this property we're talking about now with additional lots. So that's where that came from, and that's where the cul-de-sac issue came from.
I see.
So the members of that HOA and Falcon's View are supportive of one home going in there versus several. Whether they're willing to let that cul-de-sac, that bulb stay there permanently or not, I guess we could find that out.
Again, they would have to dedicate that property, right?
Or it remains,
Change the plat.
Well, right, because you couldn't just clip it like, because of the outlots. You'd have to keep this as a bulb because they do snow plow and they do,
Yes,
They
there's
do
homes that
go
access
around in
it.
a circle there.
There's a need to turn around there.
yeah,
Right.
there is a need. Unlike
Yes, there is a need, yes.
Mr. Herman, it's more difficult.
So if we're leaving,
But there again, they might be willing to do that on the condition that there's only one house, one lot, and there's no further subdivisions.
right,
But the other issue is that we have setbacks from right of way. So if a right of way is dedicated there around that bulb,
Yeah.
and there
It'd
are
be
lots,
33 feet more.
it's gotta be 50 feet from their home, and I don't know if that's,
Sean, with the highlighted area that's up there on the map, is that supposed to be further subdivided into more lots than what there are now
Originally?
originally?
I don't have, I've never seen plans for a development. We just talked about it a little bit, but under the current zoning and the current land use plan, all it allows, based on the size of the parcel, 19 acres, is 3 lots, 5-acre lots,
In that rectangular area?
in that rectangular area, including the existing home. So you can get the existing home, and you can get up to 2 more lots on there.
Okay.
So I'm a little concerned about dedicating right of way around that bulb and meeting setback requirements from the houses. And
Yeah.
potentially lot size. I don't know how big they are, but if they're just at the, 9 times out of 10, lots are just big enough to meet the requirements of the zoning district. And so if the lot size diminished, I can see right now, looking at the property to the north, the lot to the north with the house, that if the right of way was dedicated there around that bulb, it would be probably 10 feet from the house, which is way too close.
So that house was built with the expectation that that temporary bulb would not be there.
Right, not long-term.
This is the house to the north. The house to the south, there's a little more.
House to the south is a little further away, but I don't think that would meet the setback requirements either.
so
Somebody
is it possible to put a new bulb on the petitioner's
Absolutely.
property?
Under
just clip this one.
under our current ordinances, because we limit it to 1,200 feet, it's impossible. Unless, maybe the attorney says, under the other provisions for waivers, can override that section. It's something we'd have to talk to the fire chief about as well, in terms of cul-de-sac length and, get his
Because
thoughts on
if
that.
we could clip the existing one, that would give those property owners,
Right, clip the existing one, move the bulb onto this property,
right,
but we currently run into the length limit.
Well, I don't think that's a major issue, but
Well, the length, yeah.
We have
I
to
agree.
solve it. We'd have to solve it one
We'd
way or
have
the
to
other.
solve it, but it's not
Not the end of the
insurmountable
world.
because
Right.
And that
Right.
would,
you either grant a waiver under the general provision, if
Or
Attorney
change the
Macy can get
ordinance.
us there, or we amend our ordinance to say, well, we can grant waivers up to
A quar- a
1250 or
quar- a quarter mi-
1350.
A quarter mile is,
quarter mile.
is typical, 1320, yeah.
And that would probably be enough.
and that would give Mr. Price the option of dividing off that west 5 acres maybe at some time in the future.
That's not gonna work for me.
Well, it doesn't have to, if you don't want it to.
Right, but I mean, the expense of that bulb for one lot doesn't work. To push that bulb,
Because you're not interested in creating two lots, you just
No.
want the one, and so.
I mean, if I did two, it would start to make monetary sense, but with one, it doesn't.
Mhm.
And what is the approximate size of that rectangle? Just approx.
The full parcel size, you mean?
Yeah.
The whole rectangle.
Rectangle there.
It's 19, I think, isn't it? Yeah, 19.13,
Acres?
Sean? Yeah,
Yes.
And who owns the existing home? Here? Would you be willing to split the cost of that cul-de-sac extension to get another lot up on the hill? No. No? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Worth asking.
In that case, it may not happen at all then.
May not.
What do we do with the temporary cul-de-sac then?
It stays.
Sorry, say again, Karen?
You would just wait for I mean, there's gotta be a reason why that developer didn't extend, this development to here.
That was 2008, that was a bad time.
Yeah, oh, yes.
yeah, you ran into a recession.
But the way he proposed to bring it into was the horseshoe back to the north, where there's a big giant kettle in the property, and it just wouldn't, I don't feel like it would work.
It also doesn't work under our, as I mentioned, our plan and our zoning, right, and it doesn't allow, we need to change the zoning and a change the plan. Consider the development.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, what do you mean by that? You wouldn't connect, you would what?
I just mean any more than two lots.
Oh, okay.
Requires a change in the plan and a change in the zoning.
Well, what are the lot size in Falcon View?
Well, they're smaller, but again, the plan has this as larger lots.
Everything around it is smaller though, right?
Right,
So there would be argument to change the plan if you wanted to match the subdivision to the west,
right.
especially because it would share Apple Lane. But that isn't the current state, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's no different than any other developer who comes in and
And ask for change.
changes, right?
So I'm just curious, is that there was a plan drawn up for this, but no discussion or no changes at all? The land use plan to the zoning?
I wasn't around in that, so I don't know.
I wasn't.
I'm sure they amended the land use plan for, that Falcon, I'm sure they had to do a land use amendment for that.
So,
Yeah, those lots don't look more than 2 acres, do they, Sean, or rough?
1.6. 1.7.
you turn the zoning later?
Okay. That sounds great.
Well, it's 1 acre on the north side.
definitely look at that, you could definitely, I mean, if you wanted to, you could amend the land use plan.
You could for a future connection.
Right,
But
and it-
again, that property has some serious
Oh,
topography.
Right,
issues
yeah.
For any conservative development. I just don't see how you squeeze 1 acre lots in there based on the topo.
We could do A2, but there again, too, it's the topo.
Development's limited on this parcel either way.
Say again, Sean?
Development on the parcel is limited, whether you change the plan or not, based on the topography.
Thank you.
Oh, what's the answer?
Yeah, what is the answer?
I don't know.
No, I think I looked at the plat for this one as well. It just noted as a temporary cul-de-sac to be extended. I mean, they're all over the place in the village, you know, temporary cul-de-sacs. And it's common practice to do, bring them to the property line so the next guy can attach to it. But in cases like this or the past one, there's constraints that maybe weren't thought about at the time, or maybe the property wasn't as developable as they thought at the time, and so there's issues, and so and the cul-de-sac length, I mean, maybe the ordinance was different back then, I don't even know. When the official map was drawn, when when it was laid out to extend permanently, whether or not, they paid attention to those things. So we have to deal with the realities of what our ordinance say currently, and so, or change them.
Sean, please refresh my memory. From that little cul-de-sac, then there's those dotted lines that come up to where his proposed
Yeah.
building would be. Is that a roadway?
That was talk about if the plan commission was of a mind to approve the house, the split, approve the 10-acre split, put a house on there. He's showing where he would locate the house so that if in the future there's any more development, there'd be room for a road if we needed to. It's north of the road, for instance, so it could come through.
So that is an intended road.
That'd be an intended future road if he sold the property down the line. It's giving you to be able to say, okay, the house is located there, we could connect the road for any more development if you allow this one house.
Well, then what would you do for getting to your home if that was built? Would you be driving over grass or field or whatever?
Right now, with just the one home,
Yeah.
I'd put a paved drive in.
Right through where that road would be,
Driveway
would
to
be a
the
driveway for now.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
But again, that roadway isn't likely to connect all the way to the east of the property, because it doesn't go anywhere, it wouldn't go anywhere, it wouldn't serve a purpose.
Is it possible to leave the temporary cul-de-sac legally, a temporary cul-de-sac? If there's only one home one additional coming off of it?
Yeah, it's understood based on the plat, calling it a temporary cul-de-sac. It's understood that it would be extended when the property to the east develops. It doesn't explicitly say that in this case, like the other one we talked about does. That said, if, when the property to the west develops, that the cul-de-sac will be extended at the expense of the developer. It's just understood that as development happens, that's the norm, that they get extended. There's nothing in our ordinances that requires it, it's just part of the plat.
Sean, you also mentioned, and I did not go out to this site, but that the topography is rather challenging for development,
Right.
residential development.
Yes.
Did I misunderstand you? Or?
No, you didn't misunderstand me. Not for one home necessarily, it's not that
No,
challenging.
East Dock is.
Yeah, it'd be challenging to do a more extensive development with 1 to 2 acre lots like the development to the west. That was my point.
Okay, thank you.
is it possible for the petitioner to just put a private driveway, connect to the existing
Yes.
turnaround?
I mean, practically, yes, it's possible, but again, you're left with a temporary cul-de-sac with pavement on private property where the plat says it's temporary and it was intended to be extended, so.
But it doesn't say it has to
Doesn't-
be extended.
Well, it does not explicitly say that in this case.
It is really a stupid question.
That's just
But you do own all this land, right?
I don't own any of it yet, that's my intent.
He wants to buy 10 acres from the
He
owner.
wants to buy 10, I think. Okay.
When they platted those roads, they took no consideration as practically at all.
Right.
And that would not necessarily mean that they were never plotted or documented roadway. It was just anticipated, so it's not cut in stone that road would have.
The official map, you mean?
Position.
The official map, yeah. Yeah, but it does show the extension. We can change the official map at any time we want. If we don't think it makes sense anymore to connect those roads because of the conditions, we can change the official map. That's not really the problem. The problem is it's a temporary cul-de-sac, platted as a temporary cul-de-sac with just like before, the other case, with a bulb size that's too small, with no right-of-way dedicated. And so, could you leave it alone and forget about it? Maybe, but it could be an issue down the line.
It's definitely not gonna be the only one.
No, it will not be the only one.
And there's no way in heck that will ever get extended. I mean,
Uh,
look, it would have to go across existing properties. Vernon's not gonna buy,
It could be the bulb could be extended and put on this property, and maybe instead of one lot, there's two lots, and that's how you pay for the bulb extension, by creating two lots instead of one. And so it wouldn't go through, I don't think it's ever gonna go through the
That's right,
property,
but-
but just to bring it onto the property
Right.
is a possibility. It's not in the plans for the petitioner, he doesn't really wanna develop any more than just his one lot. And so he's saying
I could
doesn't make
carve
any
out the area possibly for the bulb to go in there.
what do you mean by carve out? Oh,
Take-
the right of way?
Yeah,
To dedicate the right of way for the extension at some time in the future if there was ever another lot created.
Oh my God, they turn out what this is that.
okay, maybe not then.
Doesn't solve the issue.
It doesn't solve the issue.
Doesn't
The
solve
issue
the
still is it's,
Somebody's gotta pay for and build that through somehow. Either extend the road, which doesn't sound practical, or just extend the bulb.
right, it can't be dedicated where it's at because there's not enough setback from the
Right.
homes.
Right. That's the trouble with dedication and making it permanent right where it is.
Right, in this case, in the other case, you could because there's no
Right.
homes, there's no setback. In this case, you cannot dedicate it where it's at because the right of way would be too close to the houses.
Basically the same situation we just had.
Yeah, with
Worse.
more complications.
With less options, with less
Less
options.
options or more complications, whichever way you wanna think about it, right?
What more, was there more complications?
Well, there's,
Same thing.
But we can't leave it in place where it's at and dedicate it as a permanent cul-de-sac because the right of way would be too close to the houses. So
Right.
it's either gotta be forgotten about and just forget that it's a temporary cul-de-sac and just leave it be and ignore it, or it's gotta be brought on the property and extended. But in order to do that, we have to change our ordinances to allow that. Unless the attorney says that we can grant a waiver,
which he might.
which he may come down on that.
He may come down on that. I see his point there. But just leaving it there, I think there's risk. I know what I would do if I lived in one of those two homes. It's in
Well-
effect a taking.
He says he spoke to one of them and they didn't have an issue with it, and the rest of the neighborhood doesn't necessarily have an issue, but
The HOA was willing to sign a letter for me to bring here, but I didn't know how far this was gonna go tonight anyway, so.
they'd be willing to sign a letter that says they would leave it as is with the bulb on their property.
So I'm not, I mean, what they say and what they put in writing may be two different things. But Jerry told me, he is the driveway, the home to the north of the bulb. He told me he'd be fine with leaving that bulb there, knowing that there's only one house going behind
Right.
it versus several. So I have not talked to the people on the south end of the bulb yet, but, I mean, less traffic may be better, considering what they're used to at a dead end right there.
And so whatever they sign, basically saying they're okay with it, in terms of, I don't know what that means for liability in the future or potential change in their mind. It'd be something the village attorney would have to weigh in on what he would expect to happen and what they would say and agree to.
Well, it's an active homeowners association.
Yes.
This one is.
Is there some legal way that they could sign off on it? Relieve the village of any liability?
Maybe, like that, I said that was a question for Attorney Mason.
That would be a
maybe.
question, that'd be a legal question. I don't think it's gonna be up to the homeowners association because they do not own the property. Those two homeowners do, not the homeowners association. They can sign whatever letter they want, but I know what the legal answer is gonna be. It's gotta be a recorded instrument. It's gotta be recorded
Right.
against their deed, their property.
But the only thing,
And-
the homeowners association would be involved in maybe
In the
saying
plat,
that the
yeah.
plat, okay,
Right.
we recognize it says,
As
it
a,
says temporary.
they might have to get the homeowners association to also sign off, as well as the two
Yeah,
homeowners.
recognizing it's not gonna be ever extended.
Right. And that,
They may be willing to do that, knowing that there's only gonna be one home on this 10 acres here.
well, then there'd be, as part of that, they're going to insist that Mr. Price here agree never to subdivide his
It
property.
would have to be a deed.
And we could put a deed
restriction.
A deed
restriction on it.
restriction on it.
Yeah.
So maybe they'd be willing to do that for that deed, in exchange for that deed restriction.
Okay. I could try it.
So it sounds
Right?
like,
I mean,
yeah, it sounds like you may have to ask them exactly what they'd be willing to sign and in that capacity for the bulb, for the temporary cul-de-sac never to be extended, and then we'd have to talk to
Attorney
the
Mason,
village
right?
attorney to see if that would be something he'd be comfortable with, limiting the village's liability of not extending that cul-de-sac.
Is there any issues with those homes not meeting the setback requirements that are in those temporary cul-de-sacs?
Well, we would not dedicate any right of way.
Okay,
We would not, it wouldn't be an option here.
okay.
So you're thinking, Sean, the bulb would stay, but you wouldn't extend the 33-foot right-of-way
Right,
past the bulb to the north or to the south into the people's driveways.
right. I feel like I already know what
So
Attorney
that's a
Mason's gonna
legal
say,
issue
but
too, I suppose, but
What's he gonna say?
I feel like he's gonna err on the side of caution here and say, well, they can sign whatever they want, but in the end,
Would that require a deed restriction on parcel A and parcel B?
parcel, yeah, we might have to do that, because even though parcel A, the south parcel, couldn't be subdivided under our current comp plan and land use, and in zoning, doesn't mean you couldn't change it to subdivide it in the future, so we would have to have a restriction on both.
it's a parcel A and B. Oh, you're talking
Though-
about the 10 acres and the 9 acres.
However,
Right?
we'd have,
A and
we
B? Okay.
could caveat it in saying that it couldn't be subdivided with access from Applin Lane, because they do have access to, another road.
This is the south parcel, Mr.
Right.
Briggs' parcel.
Not that they want to divide that further, but they do have other options.
Right.
Well, yeah, the point there, there might have to be something on his deed as well, saying he can't subdivide with access to Alpine Lane either. So, he's close. But he's not interested, he's just stated he's not interested in extending it anyway. Doesn't want to pay for it. Plus, he's selling the property, it's part of his transaction.
You're purchasing all the whole property.
I'm trying to purchase the 10 acres to the north.
Yeah, right.
This is gonna require a certified survey map, and that's why it's conceptual, right, Sean? So,
Right.
So it sounds like our next step is to get more information.
Again,
Well, that's what I wrote that on, I wrote that on the top of my page, this will be tabled, this will be tabled. It's just a matter of getting there.
well, we're gonna have to send it back to the petitioner and the property owner to get some agreement, maybe. I guess we should find out from, our attorney if that's gonna be feasible or not, though.
Right, right.
Unless petitioner wants to ask his lawyer. If it is.
I think that should probably come from John, since we're involved in that.
Yeah, it's related to protection of the village in terms of liability.
Well, sometimes petitioners want to know the answers too. It's a chargeback.
Oh, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying, if they want to get the answer
Yeah.
from their side. But
From
we-
their side, and it's easier, it's cheaper and easier for Attorney Macy to review
Something that they've
something
researched.
that they've said, oh, no, this is okay, here's why. And he's checking someone, otherwise he's just gonna research it
Good point.
and charge it.
Wouldn't that bounce back off of Sean and the village attorney? I'd
Yeah.
feel like we'd be playing ping pong.
Well, ultimately, the village attorney is gonna have to review whatever's proposed and
Right.
provide comment on, provide counsel on whether or not he thinks it's adequate.
Yeah, we don't want to send you down a dead lane to only, for the attorney to say, you can't do this. So you've just paid Sean all this money on a chargeback, for something you can't do?
I mean, you're always gonna have legal charges too.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Question is, do you wanna take it further?
right. One way to go is spend the legal money to say whether you can do it or not do it, and then go to the neighbors. The neighbors may say, forget it. Then you've wasted all your legal money. Another thing to do is go to the neighbors and see what they're willing to do
Right,
first, and then take it back to Sean to see if we can do it, and Attorney Macy to see if we can do it.
But the neighbors would have to, did you say they would have to give like right-of-way space, or no?
No,
No.
they would be agreeing to allow that temporary cul-de-sac to remain permanently where it's at, on their property.
Mm-hmm.
And the association would be agreeing to, the same thing, basically, leaving the cul-de-sac in place as permanent, even though the plat says it's temporary.
I think that would be a good starting point.
So get that information, see if they're willing to sign and record something to that effect, and then we could see if that would be,
Right, they're absolutely gonna have to sign something on a deed that's recorded. Otherwise, it's meaningless.
and lost forever, yeah.
It's meaningless. Yeah, it wouldn't show up on a title search to the next buyer, and the next buyer may say, what are you talking about?
I get it, I get
Right.
it.
You know,
Right,
they're
that's
just
right.
not gonna do it. And, you know, if I'm one of these two property owners, if they're willing to do it, I would say,
So what
you
about
better
amending?
they're gonna have to get their mortgage company to sign off.
So
on
what
it,
about
too.
amending the plat in this case? In the last one, we just mentioned that the requirement would be to modify the plat to change the language on the temporary cul-de-sac. Is that also a requirement here, that the plat needs to be modified to note that as no longer being a temporary cul-de-sac, that it would, that
I would
a
think so,
notes need to be added that says it's gonna be permanent?
right.
Is it built for permanent specs though?
It's not, I don't think, I don't think it's the proper width.
Well, okay, let's go through the specs. Is it just a width problem as opposed to how much gravel is down, what the road base is,
Yeah,
how much asphalt is
Don't
there?
know.
Because if it's permanent, then, you know, if it's temporary and they thinking it's just gonna get cut out, maybe they didn't have to bring it up to full road specs. I don't know what the
It
answer to
looks-
that is
So
either.
it looks permanent to me, it looks built exactly the same as the other cul-de-sac in the neighborhood, which is at the north end of River Ridge Circle. Looks like the same width, it looks like it's got a gravel shoulder around it. It looks like a permanent cul-de-sac.
Yeah, John just said they plow there, but they don't plow Bassler Lane because there's no houses there, but they do plow here. And
Right.
it's adequate to make, there's, you know,
The size of it's adequate to
yes.
make the
yes,
turn right now.
yes, mhm.
Do we know what the width of that one is? Sean?
I don't know,
So we can get this information too.
but it's the same size as the other cul-de-sac to the north, River Ridge, which is a permanent
Okay,
deeded
well,
cul-de-sac.
that's helpful then.
Is it?
I'm just looking at it,
I'm trying,
I mean, looking at it, eyeballing it, it looks like it's the
Yeah,
same.
it is.
maybe it looks bigger because they have that little line around it.
Yeah, it's about the same size.
Is it? Okay.
The little line.
The
little
the
gravel
shoulder, the
edge.
gravel
shows
shoulder.
The
Yeah,
little
sure.
gravel edge?
Yeah, yeah, it goes in a circle on
Yeah.
River Ridge.
So you can be, you know, I guess we may have to look at the specs of the cul-de-sac to see if the
How it's
sub-base and
built.
everything was done the same as the other cul-de-sac, but the size looks identical.
Right. So we need to look at that. You're gonna talk to the two neighbors and the homeowners association, or you and
Yes.
Mr. Briggs are together?
Yes.
And John just brought up 3 more roads that we have the same issue with.
Yeah.
You know.
After he talks to the neighbors, though, shouldn't he get back to Sean and tell him if it's a go or no go from his perspective?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Perpetuate this thing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
we
have
don't
my
wanna-
contact information.
I assume you wanna get going on this, so you
I'd
can,
like to, yes.
so you can get a final certified survey map and get your plans so you can start building in the spring.
Well, first would be the subdivided survey, and then I have to create my own with the house, septic, and,
Right.
yeah.
Consensus to table, further information?
Yes.
I got all 4 heads nodding yes. Everybody has their homework, everybody knows where they're going and what they need to do?
Yes.
Sean, are you good?
Yeah, and
Mr. Price, Mr. Briggs?
we won't talk to Attorney Macy until we get more
Right,
information.
so it's not, right. Let's not talk to him. We don't want any charges for that until we know what's gonna happen.
Right,
He's not cheap.
I bet not.
It's not that he's not cheap, it's just that you're on the clock.
We'll do some
But
homework
worth every penny.
first.
Yes, yes.
We'll do some homework first.
Okay, are we good?
We're good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we could take a 5-minute break. I know we've got 2 things on the agenda here, conditional uses and subdivision definition of residential development. And to be frank, I was hoping to do maybe one of those 2, item D versus, instead, and not try to do both, but if we can get through item D yet this evening, it'd be helpful. I think at our staff meeting, when Sean was there, we ordered the priorities, and letter D, the conditional use, was high priority because of Act 67 and our conditional uses. And
Right.
you saw the handout and what needed to be struck, and we're exposed on everything that's been struck, or proposed to be struck, sorry.
Correct.
So can we, 5 minutes, and then tackle that one, and then I won't, it'll be probably close to 10, and we'll just adjourn and put the next one when we can get another shot at it. How's that? Deal? Good? Okay, so we'll go, off of that clock let's try to get back by 9:20. Take a short recess. right, recess is over, we're back in session, it's, whatever it is, 9:22. Okay, next up on the agenda is amendments to the Village of Vernon zoning code, specifically section 300-22, Article 5, conditional uses. And this has been on our list of to-do items since I was elected anyway, because it wasn't done prior to this. So this is all as a result of Wisconsin Act 67, which changes the conditional use law and makes it conditional use is a matter of right rather than a matter of discretion. And the problem with that is, as we've seen in our conditional use hearings with substantial evidence, things have to be approved as opposed to discretion. So, with that in mind, we'll turn it over to Sean and he can walk us through our conditional use zoning.
Yeah, that's a good introduction, thanks. So what I've done, and we've been talking about this since January, that's when my memo was originally written, and then subsequently,
Sean, to be clear, that's January 29,
January 2020.
24?
2020.
No, 20, yep, January 29th.
Oh, in terms of the yeah, could be, I'm not looking at the date, I'm
Oh,
just,
okay.
I
It's
remember that
2020.
we started
Okay.
talking about this in January.
Yep,
And so what I have is some recommended edits to the code itself. And so it's a red line version of the code that you guys got last time around. The changes in here are a couple of things. One is there's language added, like at the beginning, that talks about substantial evidence and how you weigh these things, just matching basically what's required of the law. I won't spend too much time on that. So there's a little bit on the first page, and then if you scroll down to the third page, there's more in terms of determination, what you can and can't review. And so this kind of gets at what you'd be looking at as you look at conditional uses related to landscaping and architecture and lighting and traffic circulation. Also mentions that, you know, it's conditions imposed have to be based on substantial evidence and related to the purpose and intent of the ordinance. Again, just to keep it in line with Act 67. But the meat, I guess the meat of this comes in the actual conditional uses itself. One thing we did add, though, at the top of page 5, before I get into the actual conditional uses, is to allow, because we're striking all of these uses potentially, we are allowing the continuation of any existing conditional use permit. So if you have a conditional use permit for an event barn, for instance, if we were to strike event barns, which is not one of the ones that we are necessarily looking at striking, we're looking at adding it to it, but if we did, you'd be allowed to continue your conditional use, no problem. You could even come in and ask for amendments to it as if it was in the code itself. So what this does is it doesn't create legal nonconforming uses all over the place. So if you have one of these several uses that are being stricken, you can still operate as you are allowed to. You can ask for changes and amendments to it as long as it follows what's allowed in your permit itself. So you have to basically act according to what your permit says in the amendment process that's listed in your permit.
If we have an existing conditional use, is that we take it out? You're saying it can continue as is?
Yep.
In your,
It's
in
gra-
your,
it's grandfathered in, and you can
Right.
even amend it according to the conditions of your permit itself.
in your third sentence there, you've got it, is no longer an allowed use. Is that the right term we should be using, allowed use?
There's no longer a permitted conditional use of the property, maybe that's it. Does that make maybe more sense?
Yeah, I think allowed would be something that's permitted by right. Or should we say approved use?
Let's see, and the use was legally in operation on the date of the appeal, that is no longer, I would recommend permitted conditional use.
Okay,
where are we at? I know,
On top of page 5, where we
Page-
talk
yes.
about
Third
continuation of
sentence.
existing
Yes.
permits.
which word?
change allowed to permitted conditional use, right?
Correct. That's good for clarification.
We're changing it to what?
Are we gonna start way back at the beginning, or are we gonna start there and go backwards, or how are we doing this?
Well, the beginning is, I was just trying to get through the whole thing and kind of describe.
We're trying to give a
Just an overview. Yeah,
overview first, okay?
Okay.
right.
Well, that's fine.
So let me just
I
make
have
a
a
note.
bunch of other questions on that, but
Yeah.
we'll circle back, and,
Let me
All
make a
right.
no,
note.
that's fine, that's a good point.
Fine.
All right, I just wanted to make a note of that. Okay, so, yeah, that essentially allows people to continue their use, modify their use according to the conditions of their permit, so they're not legal non-conforming, they're grandfathered, they can continue, they can change it. So we're not creating headaches all over the place by striking all these conditional uses. We've clarified under the next section that we do this now, but just that it's in the code now, that all public hearings are jointly by the Town Plan Commission and Town Board, because everyone's gotta hear the evidence, right? I mean, in order to act on it, everyone has to hear all the evidence and testimony presented. And then, so then just getting into the uses themselves, we've basically stricken every use, every conditional use that we didn't feel had adequate conditions associated with them. Because as you know, Act 67 basically says if an applicant can meet the conditions, satisfy the conditions in your ordinance and others imposed by you that are backed up by substantial evidence, then you have to approve the permit. So we're striking all these uses, we're keeping the ones that we felt had adequate conditions. Those could still be modified if you had suggestions for them, but the ones that were no-brainers were sorely lacking in conditions. In addition, as I mentioned before, we added an event barn, which was simply a determination before by the Plan Commission with a series of conditions, but we're memorializing now in the code so that all of the conditions that were approved as part of the determination are in here in case someone else wants to do an event barn. The changes that weren't added to this, so basically, this was written months ago, before the Alexes came back in and requested their last round of amendments to the determination, so I would need to add those as well in here for the definition, and there was a couple conditions that were changed as part of the last round of the determination. So that would be updated if this goes to public hearing. I would provide the latest and greatest language on that. The last big thing is that, aside from striking a number of uses, we would be striking the wireless telecommunications, or what is it called? Is it called cell towers? Trying to scroll down. Whatever was in here before for cell towers is being stricken and being replaced by, it was called telecommunication facilities in the bottom of page 30. And we're replacing that with wireless telecommunication mobile service facilities with language that is based on a sample from Attorney Macy that is intended to regulate these to the fullest extent that's possible for local governments. So there's a lot of protections for cell towers, but this allows us to regulate as much as we possibly can, including the provision that requires a setback from properties that allow residential uses to be at least set back the height of the tower, which is what's allowed by law. So what that would have done, if this was on the books, for the last cell tower that was proposed down on Scenic and Artesian, this would have required a greater setback, if we would have had this ordinance in place, at that time. So I think at the very end, I've made some changes, to wireless towers, and I think, let me just make sure there's nothing, and that sort of wraps it up at this point in time. The idea is that as petitioners, well, let me back up. I mentioned before that the Waukesha County is going through the same process. They're looking at every conditional use. Most of our conditional uses were closely mirrored on their language because when we adopted our zoning ordinance, it was based on an offshoot of their ordinance. So they're going to be looking at those in detail. The ones we're striking, I'm sure that they'll have conditions for a lot of those. When that becomes available as a draft, we can either agree to adopt those or make some changes to them based on the research that they've done. and the time that they spent in looking at these through different communities in the county, or we can not accept them and just wait for specific petitioners to petition something. So for instance, if we take out one of these uses such as restaurants and taverns and so on, that's a conditional use in residential areas. And so we take that out, someone comes in later on and petitions to add it back in as a conditional use, proposes conditions just like we did for event barns. That's something that we can add in down the line, either by our, we can add it back ourselves with conditions, possibly based on the things the county does, or wait for someone else to petition it to be added back into to the ordinance. So that's all I have as an overview. I know President Fortner has additional questions. Some of you may also have questions or comments.
Sean, could we first, as part of your overview, go through the procedure that we will need to follow, or just you can outline it for us, to make these changes?
Oh, certainly. All that has to happen to make the changes to the zoning ordinance is a public hearing has to be noticed and held. And we could do that jointly with the Plan Commission and the board, because it's got to go through both.
Right?
Changes to the zoning ordinance have to be recommended by the Plan Commission and approved by the board. So we can do them as separate meetings. We'd have to decide where we're going to hold the public hearing for that if we don't do them jointly. And so that's all that's required is one public hearing to amend the ordinance, and after that, they can take effect.
You'll make changes everywhere it says.
Everywhere it's,
to village?
yeah, so that's another question. I don't know if this is the proper time to do that or not, because the rest of our ordinances all say town, right? The rest of our zoning ordinance all says town. The rest of every single ordinance that's on the books in our code says town. So I don't know if it's better to do it now or leave it as town to be consistent with the rest of the ordinance, and that's probably a question for Attorney Macy as to the best time to do that, because I wouldn't want one specific section in the ordinance to be incongruent with the rest of the ordinance necessarily, where just the conditional use talk about village, but every other section in the code talks about town. Or we could do it now. We could make all the changes to the zoning ordinance now and change town to village. That wasn't something we talked about yet. The only problem with that is that there's other changes that have to be made to the ordinance related to Waukesha County. We have to strip all the Waukesha County out. We have to rewrite all those sections to be just village only, and so that's a bigger effort than just the conditional uses.
Right, and we got shoreline.
And we got shoreline stuff that is another project for another day.
That would be a good question for the attorney as to whether or not, how in-depth do we have to get with changing from township ordinances to village ordinances?
Right.
Can we make a general motion in certain general areas or more specifics and so on? We could address that to him, that'd be good.
Yeah, we could ask him when the timing of that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Sean, you're involved with other communities, but I don't know if you've been involved with towns going to villages.
I have,
You have?
yes.
Have they been doing what I call on a rolling basis? Meaning that we do this as a village, the next document that comes up, that's a village? And you said it's gonna go to Macy, but
Yeah,
trying to get a feel for what.
yeah, in another community we worked for, that changed from a town, it was the village of Windsor in Dane County. We were a town, now we're a village. They basically took an ordinance at a time. So they changed their zoning ordinance and made all the changes there. They added the shoreline stuff, the floodplain stuff. And then they slowly packed away at the rest of their code of ordinances to make those changes, so. Yeah, there's no specific requirement. I think we talked to Attorney Macy about this. There's nothing that says that there's a timeline on those changes. It just, and everybody knows when we say town in our ordinance, it means village now because we're a village.
Right. His view has steadfastly been that all the ordinances carry over by statute. By statute, whether they say town or village, or
Right.
whether it's if county to village, whether town to village, county to village, it all
The
carries over.
intent is that you're a village.
Right.
Rather than itemize or
Right, so even if we left this all as town for now, it wouldn't really have any bearing. Obviously, it's something that has to be cleaned up and should be cleaned up at some point in the future, just like you should change your sign out front to say Village of Vernon, but, you know, your website, all those things have to be updated eventually. The website does?
It says
Good,
village.
good, that's awesome. So I will ask him about timing on that.
Because I do see in, newspapers where sometimes we're referred to, and I'm not a step, but it's Town of Vernon, the Village of Vernon.
Yeah,
Okay, so I would think the public out there is totally confused.
yeah, I'm sure. I'll-
Everyone said no.
We haven't amended anything yet. No, and none of the ordinances have been amended to change from town to village yet. No.
No, but I mean, all the work you did on air conditioning.
Oh, their conditional uses. We did something very similar in the town of Waukesha, now the village of Waukesha. We made changes, we actually made those changes before they became a village, but we did something very similar where we kept the conditional uses that we thought had appropriate conditions, and we struck everything else that didn't have conditions yet. And we're not adding them back in yet. They're basically just gonna play it by ear. We may add them back in the future, if we feel like spending the time on it, or as petitioners, applicants say, hey, I wanna do this use, it's not in the books, can I petition for this conditional use? So, yeah.
Charles, you have more?
Do you wanna go through any of this?
Yeah, we can start going through it, if you'd like. I do have a lot of notes when I went through it, and questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in order to go, I asked you about the procedure, because in order to get to public hearing, we have to have something to go to public hearing, so
Right.
the.
It could be a modified version of this document
Right.
based on comments that we make. yeah.
Right, so it might take a meeting or two to, even to get this thing teed up to go to public hearing.
If you wanted to see revisions before then.
Right, right. Right, we should, well, in my view, as a board, we should present the public with what our view should look like, what the changes are.
Yeah,
The public can comment, and then we can go back and we need to take those comments into consideration. And there'll be some good ideas, I'm sure, and make changes accordingly, you know,
Are the comments from the public binding, or are they advisory?
advisory.
Okay.
yeah, and there may not be a lot of public comment on changes to this section of the code. You know, it doesn't necessarily bring people out in droves when you're proposing changes to your zoning ordinance.
It's only transference, yeah, you're maintaining the same level.
Right.
I read through this already, you made some good changes, or eliminations probably, better way to put it.
Yeah.
Right.
'Cause,
Chairman Ford, do you just want to start and just maybe
Oh,
give us some
sure.
of your notes?
Yeah, so I guess we'll just go page by page. Page one, you know, the approval required, I think that's the law. What you tried to do is state the law there. Decision to approve or deny in the middle of that is based on substantial evidence at the public hearing. Application, there's gotta be an application, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, public hearing. The public hearing, this is one of the things that, I've heard personally some blowback from residents, the 300 feet, as in 300 feet,
Not big enough.
not long enough, yeah. And what
You-
we're talking about here is landowners, which could be homes, residences, that are abutting certainly, but even if not abutting, to a potential conditional use that could very well affect their property, and 300 feet, that's like 2 subdivision lots.
Is that a state requirement, Sean?
I'd have to check on that. I don't remember if there's a requirement for, the public hearing's a requirement. I don't know about the size. You can obviously make it as big as you want. This is your own ordinance. You
Yeah.
can make it larger than if there is a requirement.
But it's-
300 feet's very common. I see that all over the place.
It's been that way for a long, long time.
300 feet is used in a lot of ordinances for noticing.
I just think it's extremely short.
Depend on what's proposed, I guess.
It is.
Well, that's true too,
You know, if you're proposing a pig farm,
then it might be a half a mile.
Okay,
Right.
you're proposing an antique store, it's not a big concern. You put that in an old farmhouse, but if you're gonna turn that farm into a pig farm,
Right, it depends, I suppose, but, you know, 300 feet, 300 feet, you would agree, Dan, would be too short for a pig farm, but maybe not for an antique.
Yeah.
I'd say it's too short for the antique barn too, but, you know,
Well, that just guarantees that you contact all the adjacent properties.
right.
Right,
Because it's.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Any,
right. so
Across,
maybe-
you get
maybe
across
two
the street,
properties,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, because you can still comment, you don't have to be 300 feet.
Well, that's a policy decision.
But it's the notification. The problem is,
Yeah.
people say, I did not receive notification.
No, I get it. But what I'm saying is it's purely a policy
Yeah,
decision.
it is.
And it's
Right.
just, it's got, it's just what you want to do.
And then there's days before too, 7 days before, with the US Postal Service, I don't know how that could possibly, in order to actually receive notice within 7 days of the public hearing, you'd have to mail it at least 15 or 21 days in advance to make sure it got there.
Right.
And the 7 days refers to postmark,
Well, and it
when you
also
get
says
notice,
here,
right, Karen?
it's also
Yeah.
not less than
Yes.
7 days, Carl.
So-
Less than 7 days.
I'd have to double check for the state requirements on noticing requirements. I'm thinking that it's not necessarily required for a conditional use to notice anybody. Because a public hearing has to be noticed in the paper and that kind of thing, but I don't think there's any requirement for conditional uses for noticing property owners in the
You
state
got the same
statutes.
requirements for Board of Appeals and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just saying generally, 300 feet is way too short, and 7 days is way too few days, because the 7 days refers to a postmark date. So in reality, it's 2 days or 1 day by the time the
Sure.
mail delivers it to you.
Well, what are you
Yeah, that's a
recommending? for the
variable, too.
footage?
What am I recommending? I
A
think
thousand,
people-
1,000 feet's a nice round number,
1320, quarter mile.
quarter mile.
Yeah, well, then that means increased fees. Remember, these are conditional use permits too. I mean, somebody might say, why do we have any of them,
Right.
right?
Yeah, Karen's point is that there's a lot more that have to be sent out, so the actual application fees have to be updated there.
If you're in a highly dense area where you've got a lot of properties, it's gonna cost a bundle to send out to all those homeowners.
Time and money.
You can
And the
go a quarter
petitioner
mile.
pays it.
Hmm?
The petitioner will have to pay it in the application fee.
Yeah, but it isn't done that way, it's done as a general fee.
Oh, it's not per
Right.
person?
No,
So,
Well, that's the point.
no.
We're getting more and more dense. People should have notice. It's gonna affect a lot more people.
Karen, what did you mean, could you please restate what you said?
What I said is, no matter what you do, if you're increasing now it's 300 feet that we notify everyone by regular mail. We haven't done certified mail because most of the certified mails that we send to people come back and it costs $8 a piece. So, I mean, it's not a problem for notification. You just want to reflect, what's your fee, your initial fee for a conditional use reflects your notification in the paper and your notification to the amount of residents. And Dan's point too of being an area where you have hundreds of notifications because you're in a
And
subdivision
it's a lot more work.
versus 7
right?
farms.
And then who pays for that, the applicant?
That's
Or-
what I'm saying, is that the application could be based upon, I mean, you could do something, a fee-based application.
You mean you actually calculate the number of
Right,
homes?
yeah.
You could have a flat fee plus
Plus,
Yeah, fee,
Noticing
for your
X
publication.
dollars per notice required.
Right, because it's
Right.
not fair for
Right,
someone,
with 2 people
right,
versus 200.
But
Right.
how much time would it take your office to put out that many?
oh, not long.
No?
No, we would just use the county system,
Spit out
download
the
the,
addresses
it's
and-
real easy to do.
Print the labels off
Yep.
and,
Like, can we resolve what the distance should be then?
But I think in your 7 days, it says not less than 7
Yeah,
days.
it's not less, right?
If we can, if you choose to exceed that because it was something of a more of a priority, then, 10 days, but leave it discretionary. It says no less than 7 days.
Right, and typically when we get an application, when it meets the deadline, We do a notification to all the property owners within 300 feet if there's gonna be a land use amendment or a zoning
Rezoning.
change or conditional use. And we tell them where the information's on the website. But the actual agenda's not done yet, but at least it gives them way in advance notice and to talk to their neighbors and,
So, yeah, it kind of seems if you're gonna change it for conditional uses, then you'd probably wanna consider changing it for all the other things as well.
I agree, it should be considered changed for all of them.
Do you know of any other communities that have changed that?
Yeah, I mean, there are different numbers everywhere. I just think 300 feet's a fairly common one that I've seen over and over again.
But some have more than that.
Sure.
We're in an age where there's, the requirements of old are old. Newspaper alerts,
Right.
mailings. I mean, I mailed my son's birthday card, he got it 2 days early, and I mailed it out on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Warrenville, Illinois, got it 2 days later, but I can send stuff, to Milwaukee, and it takes 3 days.
Yeah.
So it's so variable. So the most reliable is what you have online.
right, or on Facebook or tweet.
I think online is probably the new future.
So I'm trying to think of all the communities that I know. I think 500 feet I've seen a few times. I don't know if I've ever seen as much as 1,000 or a quarter mile, but doesn't mean you can't do it.
That's a lot.
Doesn't mean you can't do it.
They can also have the agenda.
Some
sent-
communities also do this. They also put a sign out on the property that says this property is scheduled for conditional use on this date.
That's
such
really
and such a
popular.
date.
That's more
And so
popular than the mailing.
people that live near the property are gonna see it every day they pass it, and so everyone gets notified that way.
Yeah.
So you'd have some standard signs that you put out there.
Well, can we resolve, is it 500 feet, 1,000 feet, and then come to consensus?
Sure, we can do that, and put a sign on the property, I like that idea, because that's not in here.
But, yeah, if you do that, though, you have to be ready to do it, and so the next one that comes along, you have to have signs
Well,
made. and-
Yeah.
Mandatory.
But this isn't gonna be adopted tonight,
No,
or the
this would be a
next
couple
night, or-
months, a couple
it's
months.
gonna be
We
at
have some
least a
time to
couple
get ready.
Yeah.
At least a couple months.
Yeah, so say that again, what do we end on?
500 feet,
500 feet and a sign?
Carl?
I'd go more,
I know
but
you,
Oh, I'm sorry.
750?
what's the consensus of the board?
Yeah, well, let's hear the feet.
Jim?
I like a quarter mile.
Dan?
I'd leave it as is.
I have to agree with Dan, I really do.
Okay, and
Because it's generally the most accepted distance.
I agree, 300 feet, I agree with.
Any room to go to 500?
That'd be a lot easier in a quarter of a mile.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
I-
I think that's,
feel okay at 500,
all right,
I'd go 5.
that's good.
500 it is. There we go.
With a sign.
Fred's fine.
With
Yeah.
a sign, with the
With a sign.
sign. How about the days? I mean, the way I look at this is I'm not looking at this from the perspective of government, okay? Because government would say, oh yeah, 7 days, yeah, if we can get out early, that'd be great, discretionary. I'm looking at this from the person, the resident.
Yeah.
And if you say in the ordinance, you gotta mail it within 7 days and postmark it, and it might take 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. We have ballots not getting to people, and ballots are in special envelopes, for gosh sakes.
Well, this says no
So-
less. than
At
7
least
days.
7 days, it says at least 7 days before public hearing. All I'm saying is, could it be 15 days? So the person would get it 10 days in advance of the public hearing.
10 days sounds
Even 15. I mean, if
No, I'm trying to get the receipt. The person needs to receive it so he can get it on it, he or she can get it on his calendar and make arrangements to get to the public hearing, is what
I'd be
I'm
happy
saying.
with
And so if you mail it within 15 days, they'll get it within 10, right? And so they have 10 days.
Okay, what about the sign, how far in advance is the sign to be placed on property?
Wait, can we do one thing first? Can we do the,
Fifty-
are we talking about 15 days
For mailing,
for mailing?
500 feet and
At least
15 days
15
for
days.
mailing.
Pardon me?
Yeah. That's what we're-
515 days, that's,
500 feet, 15 days.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Is that feasible, 15 days?
yep, yep.
Okay.
Do we know
So-
when these public hearings are gonna be that far in advance?
We do.
Oh, yeah, we have to.
They have to be noticed a couple weeks ahead of time.
In the,
anyway.
in the newspaper, don't we have to post them before 15 days in
Yeah,
advance?
it depends on the classification, you know, if it's a class one
These
or
are class
class
two.
two.
Class 1 or Class 2?
So they have to be, 2 weeks, you have to have 1 week in between the 2 weeks prior and the one, and a gap in between before the meeting. So usually when we get a petition come in, you know, we notify that there's a public hearing. It's gonna be at the Vernon Town Hall at what time, and then all the information is on the website, so they can it's here, or they can come in the, village and look at all the information, or they can go to the website and look at all the information.
And I like the idea of the sign. Do we have any problems with going on the property and put that sign up?
It has to be in our right of way.
Sorry?
We can put it on our right of way in front
It
of the
doesn't have
property.
to be if they agree to it.
But if they agree to it,
If they
they're
can't.
the applicant.
Yeah, they're the applicant.
The only
so they
time
have-
it's gonna be tough is in the winter with Wisconsin.
How do you use a steel stake?
Yeah, well, that's tough in
Make
the-
a hole.
when it's ice and snow.
No, but steel, I do a steel stake and you pound it in and try it in.
Drill is helpful too.
Pardon me?
A drill
What?
with a
Yeah, that's
titanium
steel
bit on it.
With a giant bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So do we have a sense, do you want to do signs also at least 15 days out?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
If we decide that 15 days was the right number?
for mailing.
Or should
Did we
we
decide
I
that?
mean, I had 21 days is what I had written.
Oh, I would go with 21 too, but I was thinking,
You know, partly because
Yeah, well, their submittal's supposed to be here always 1 month
1
prior.
month prior.
right.
So, I mean, 21 it definitely is feasible. The only time it's gonna run is if it would be a quarter mile, but 500, you know, within 500 feet,
Yeah,
you know.
so.
So
to
people,
21.
Dan, what do you think?
I would go with the 15 days or make it the same as the notifications, 14 days?
Whatever you need.
Class 2 notice, is it 14? Well, it depends.
It's not 14 days, yeah.
No?
Like
I'd
it's,
go with what Dan said for 15.
Jim? Jamie?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep, it keeps it consistent too.
Yeah.
Well,
Because people
15
forget.
days is about when the first public notice goes into.
About.
It might go
About-
in before there.
A little
Before
bit.
that, a little
yeah,
bit.
so if you put 15, you're good.
Yeah.
But, you know, with all due respect, nobody reads the paper.
The
They'll get
paper
more
is-
notice on the website.
That's like,
That's not our fault.
And the other thing is people, if they're really interested, they can make a request for documents on demand, and anytime there's a public hearing in the village, they get notice of it right away.
so, on the sign on the property, also 15 days.
At least 15 days.
At least 15 days. It can go it can go earlier, yeah.
It could. Do
Yeah,
we
just
want to
can't
say
go
on the
under.
property or,
Depends on the priority, you know.
do we want to say
Right.
on the property or
Right.
in the right of way in front of the property?
Does it matter?
Well,
Well, it's gotta be, if you say, it's gotta be on the front of the property so you can read it from the road. Now, whether that's in
So,
the right of way
okay.
or,
okay,
right? Could we make it either or? Or we could make it on the property and make it, put that in
Sidebar.
the application.
You got a sidebar going on there.
Sidebars. Sean?
can we hang on our address signs,
Fire signs?
you know?
Do
we've got
vacant pro-
address Sign out there,
Does vacant property have fire signs on it?
not everything.
I don't
No.
know.
No,
You don't
Not
wanna cover
necessarily.
that up though, I don't think.
Right.
I didn't say cover it up, but you.
Next to it, he's saying, right? Yeah.
Yeah, use one part of it,
Yeah,
any other part.
got the legs.
Yeah.
They're already up. But, I don't know if we got.
I don't know. It might be easier just to keep these independent signs you put in the ground.
Yeah, that's what I would, yeah.
That way you can move them where they're most visible, because it might not be most visible by where the address is.
Right. And it's not hard to put in the ground, Karen, when it's frozen. Steel pipe as you're winding in.
I beg to differ, but
So-
Aaron's not gonna be putting them in, okay?
Say again?
that's John.
We got a volunteer.
No, I'll show them how to do it.
There you go.
So I'll say sign required at least 15 days in advance, located in front of the property, visible from public road.
Yeah, there we go. Good?
Aye?
Okay, the next page, page 3. This is your list of conditional use may include, I like that. Can we also include things like the value, or the potential diminution of value of the neighboring
Sure,
property in there? Is
yes, we could do that.
that okay?
Where are you at here?
On page 3, Sean's insert in the middle, determination, the conditional use review may include but not limited to, and he's got a long list of things.
Yes.
And I would, was proposing to add to that the, a potential diminution of the value of the neighboring property.
And potential, how about just potential impact
Yeah, potential impact on values or impact,
on surrounding property
yeah,
values?
on surrounding, yeah, not neighboring, surrounding, that's good. I mean, quite frankly, that's really what most of this is about. Is your neighbor proposing something that diminishes, increases the value of his property and diminishes yours without compensating you for it.
Good point.
Okay,
Your last sentence in red there under determination, any conditions imposed by the town must be related to the purpose and intent of this ordinance and shall be based on substantial evidence.
yes, so here's the way that works. If it's written into the ordinance itself, it doesn't have to be based on substantial evidence. So the conditions for, event bar, whatever, they're in the ordinance. Attorney Macy's made this point a number of times, and so if you impose conditions outside of the conditions that are written in the ordinance, they have to be based on substantial evidence. We need to prove to the applicant, unless they agree to them, that there's a reason and a rationale and substantial evidence required in this specific condition.
Hey, something has to be screened. They've got 2 trees there.
Yeah,
We require 8.
yeah.
What do we state for substantial evidence?
We would have to say the evidence is that, this particular tree only has 4 feet of opacity to it, and then we don't wanna see this at all viewed from the road, therefore we're requiring 8 trees versus 2. or
Isn't
something
this
like that.
all an opinion, or?
It is, but we have to posit evidence, and so if it's challenged in court, and the petitioner doesn't want to agree to it, but reluctantly does, or doesn't want to and challenges it and it goes to court, we're gonna have to defend it somehow. So that's the point of based on substantial evidence. That's what the state statute says.
So the substantial evidence would just be a reason why we're requiring it.
Right. Evidence as to why we're requiring, why it's important.
Right, that's what he said.
Right,
Yes.
if the petitioner agrees to it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
But
Right.
if they don't really fight it, well, then we have to back it up somehow.
Right,
the other question I have, Sean, is that the applicant has to prove that he can meet all the conditions. Or he has to submit substantial evidence that he's gonna meet
That he
Our
would, that he,
requirements.
yes, that he will
on the
meet,
application,
yeah, or his presentation.
or in
Right.
his presentation.
Yeah, that he will meet or can meet, or agrees to meet all the
If
conditions.
he says he will meet
If he
them
says
all.
he'll meet it,
Yeah.
and we agree to, we still have to agree that that's okay. I mean,
Right.
if he says he's gonna meet something that we just know we can't meet, then we call him on it and say, sorry, we don't think you can meet that. But if it's just, hey, please install 3 trees, and he says, okay, then we.
But
we
on the
agree.
application itself, he doesn't know what all the conditions may be.
Not
right?
necessarily,
So
only the ones in the ordinance.
Yeah,
So he's gotta, at the meeting, at the hearing, he's gotta respond to each of those conditions and either agree to them, prove to us that he will meet them or can meet them.
Appeals board.
yeah,
Does that.
okay.
Right. Yeah, the sentence here you're talking about, Sean, is your very next, the sentence that was already in there, very next one there. If the applicant, you just struck
Yeah.
the word evidence, by providing substantial, meets or agrees to meet all requirements and conditions specified in the ordinance, or those imposed by the town, which we just talked about, the conditional use permit shall be granted. My question there is, there could be substantial evidence to the contrary, and this makes it sounds like, well, we can ignore the substantial evidence to the contrary.
Oh, I see, yeah,
And it's-
unless, maybe we just say
But
unless.
that's not the law, right?
Unless, well, it is the law, unless substantial evidence to the contrary is provided.
Right.
But if he's already providing evidence he can meet it, then what other evidence would be, if we agree that he's providing evidence he can meet it, then no other opposition evidence would matter.
Well, that's not the way I think about it, or what my understanding is.
Okay,
There's a body of evidence and tiers of it. So if you're in criminal court, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. If you're in civil court, it's preponderance of an evidence. This conditional use, I'm keeping going lower and lower, is substantial.
okay. Let me,
So there can be, when you're talking about a civil lawsuit, preponderance of an evidence, there's a winner and a loser. But when you drop below 50, preponderance means more than 50%. You drop below 50%, let's say to 30%, you could have two sides at 30%.
what about this? What about, okay, if I change it to say, if an applicant, by providing substantial evidence, meets or agrees to meet all requirements and conditions specified in the ordinance or those imposed by the town, and no substantial evidence to the contrary is provided, the conditional use permit shall be granted.
Okay, that's good.
What does that mean, if any contrary evidence is provided?
No, it just means that, it just means you have to grant, if they will meet all the conditions based on substantial evidence they provided, and no contrary evidence is provided, you have to grant it. It doesn't mean you can't, and that's what the law says. That's exactly what the law says, is that it's gotta be granted if they show they can meet the evidence and nothing else to the contrary has been provided.
Right, and then in 300, if you flip back to page 1, 300-22A, Sean's new language in the middle there also says that, I think, consistent with what Sean just said, the town's decision to approve or deny any such conditional use permit will be based upon substantial evidence presented at a public hearing. There, it's just substantial evidence, doesn't say.
Whether
Whoever.
it's the petition or the opposition.
Right, and it's approve or deny.
Yeah, right.
So I think what that inserts, Sean, what we're saying is, well, if there's nothing to the contrary, and the petitioner provides substantial evidence, or agrees to meet all requirements, then I think that's the law. You have to
You have
grant
to
it.
approve.
That's Act 67. That's what Act 67 says. But with that insert then, if there is substantial evidence to the contrary, well, then the board now has leeway to either approve it or deny it, as long as there's substantial evidence for approving or denying. Okay. Everybody follow? Okay, now I am on page, and don't, if I'm trying to go fast, so stop me if I skip something that you guys have. So, page 4, oh yeah, number 8. This goes to, and I have this about whether the permit can be transferred or not.
Mhm.
And my view always is, because I think that's the way our ordinance reads, that the conditional use is the petitioner's conditional use permit, not the guy who sells it to or transfers it to. And so this goes to that question right there, 8. Transfer of conditional use status or permits. I don't know what the right word there is. Conditional use permit or status?
I don't know, I mean, status was in there all along, but we could, if you think permit is a better word, we can,
Yeah.
I don't have an opinion either way.
Right, because on 6, I was just reading, if you flip back to page 6, application for change or extension of conditional use
Yeah.
permit. 7, then it goes review of conditional use status.
Okay.
You
I-
know,
You know what I mean? I like that, let's change it to permit, transfer
Yeah, just to
conditional
be
use permit.
consistent as we go. And the next one, 9, I mean,
Yep, same
I-
thing.
same thing, I don't know if I'm gonna find them all, but maybe you can search.
I
and
can
find-
search, sure.
Yeah. Unless specifically authorized in the conditional use permit, that's good, because you can always put something in there. It says may not be transferred without the necessary public hearing form or approval. Okay, so there, I think that's all fine, except my question is, okay, using what standards? It's the standards in existence on the date of the transfer, right? Not the old standards. This isn't a grandfather transfer. This is the new guy, if he wants to continue, has to meet the current standards, right? Otherwise you're allowing him to transfer them.
Yeah,
Do we have to have without necessity in there?
well, it's basically saying you cannot transfer a permit without a public hearing.
Yeah, and then the conditional use has not continued in conformity with the conditions of the permit.
What section are you reading now?
Well, that's below number one under B.
Oh, B, gotcha.
Yeah, it basically covers that. Conditional use has not continued in conformity with the conditions of the permit.
That's a reason to terminate it, yes.
Right.
That's a reason to terminate it.
Right.
But what does that have to do with the transfer?
Hey, we're getting ahead here a little bit.
Well, I think what we're gonna run into that as we keep making changes, that I think it takes care of itself. The conditional use permit may be terminated after public hearing in a class 2
No, we're
notice.
talking, we're on transfer yet though, right?
Yeah, but
Not
as you're
termination.
going down,
Yeah.
we're making all these changes, and we may not necessarily have to do that.
So 9 is just how it terminates, right? So 9 deals with all the ways and reasons that conditional use permit can be terminated.
Right.
And so 8 is just
Eight
deal
is,
with the
eight is what you
transfer.
can transfer.
I guess I'm not following what the point is.
I'm just saying, take out the, may not be transferred without a public hearing.
Oh,
form.
you're saying it's just verbose, it's just to clean it up, yeah.
Necessity of,
Yeah, it may not be transferred without,
Without a public hearing.
Right.
Without a public hearing,
Yeah.
to simplify it. Okay.
Oh, I see, you're just,
Taking some extra words out.
Right.
okay, may not be transferred without a or you could write that in the positive if you wanted to rewrite the sentence, right? Shall only be transferred, you know, if there's a public hearing and
Yeah.
formal approval, you know, right?
Yep. Okay, so are we down to 9 then? Termination?
Right, and we're gonna put what standards are, the standards in existence on the on the,
Oh, for transfer?
yeah.
Well, would we? I mean, if someone has a permit and it's for, operating a horse stable and someone wants to buy it and they agree to all the conditions of the existing permit,
But what if
You're-
those conditions?
you're saying
change?
there might, but the problem might be that there's new conditions that just can't be met. Like now we
Right.
require a 30-foot landscape buffer around the stables, and there's just not room on the property to do that. And so he wouldn't be able to transfer it ever because he couldn't meet the new conditions. I see what you're saying. It's basically, you're saying if he had to get a new permit, if you couldn't transfer the permit, he had to get a new permit, then he'd of course have to follow the new.
Right, that's what I'm saying,
The new
that should
requirements.
happen. The permit is only good for you, the petitioner.
Yeah.
If you want to transfer it, you can't. I mean, we say you can, okay. You
But
can
really you
transfer.
can't. It almost requires a new permit. if
Permit,
gotta
you
go
need a
through
new
everything.
permit. That's my point, is you need a new permit. Otherwise, you can sell your permits. Our permits shouldn't be for sale.
That's what 8 is saying though, Carl.
Right, that's what 8 is saying, but the unanswered question in 8, the clarification I was looking for in 8 is, okay, on what standards? It doesn't say what standards. The old standards or new standards, or the current standards, I should say.
It's, the way it's written now, it's not based on any standards. It's based on
Right.
whatever's written into the permit. So
Right.
it just, here's what the permit is, now it's your permit. So
Well,
wouldn't you want some leeway on that?
no, I would think,
What if it's a use that we like, that's operated great, and someone wants to buy it, it runs great, maybe it can't meet all the conditions of the new
Well,
ordinance if we
maybe.
changed it, but now we're gonna say, well, you can't sell it, you can't get a new permit because you can't meet these conditions, and so,
well, then there's a problem with the conditions, isn't there?
not necessarily because
No.
this particular site may just not have a big enough buffer yard but maybe there's a dense landscape screening, but it's only 10 feet wide. But it effectively works, but now the new standard is 20 feet wide of landscaping, and it can't meet that condition. I'm just throwing a hypotheticals
So-
here.
yeah, it's tough to deal in hypotheticals. The problem with Act 67 is, we used to have a lot of discretion, and then
You could do whatever you
it's a lot
want.
different.
You could do whatever you
Boy,
want.
do whatever you want. Now, you gotta figure out the hypotheticals, which are, you can't think of them all.
So,
But there, for everyone like that, Sean, I agree with you, that's a good hypothetical. For everyone like that, you may wanna have tougher standards in the future, with the idea is, this one's just gonna run its course, and then after it's done, we don't want it there. Period.
yes, that's true. So, you tell me, what do you want to say?
Well, can we build in some discretion, or?
Yeah, I mean, this is a policy decision about transference of conditional use permits, so, transfer conditions unless specific.
Sorry, what paragraph are we on?
Eight,
Eight.
we're still on eight,
Still on 8,
yeah.
okay.
And I don't know if you want to set a time limit tonight or not, but
Oh, yeah. it's
I'm willing to stay as
10:15.
long as you want to, but.
No, we can't go much further. I'm just having trouble understanding if we're struggling with the freedom to do what you want by transferring a permit or status. Conditional use permit may not be transferred without necessity of a public hearing and formal approval of the town board upon receipt of the recommendation from the planning commission.
Yeah.
That says it.
But what Chairman Fordner's saying is that, well, what, do you have to follow, if there's new rules in the books for that specific conditional
Yeah.
use, in order to transfer it, do you have to follow those new rules? Which is basically saying you need a new permit.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
So why don't we just say you can't transfer it and end
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
Yeah, why not?
Well, no, I'm saying, we wanted a control over it, but then we
Yeah.
want to be lenient, isn't that kind of a double standard?
Yeah, it'd be a case-by-case basis by saying, well, you can transfer according to the old permits,
But they still have to go
and
through
you,
the
but you
process.
can't
But they still have to go through the process.
Right. And that's what that says.
I don't think we're gonna be able to set it up so that some people have to follow the rules of the old permit and some people have to follow the rules of the new permit. I think it's gotta be,
But
it's gotta
that's,
be the same all
but
the way
isn't that
around.
what you're gonna run into? That exact thing? There's two businesses. One was an old business and they have these rules, they've got their permits,
Mhm.
now they wanna sell it. In the meantime, the rules changed and a new business came, and let's say the rules are tougher. And so they had to meet the tougher rules, and now this new owner, who's not much different than the owner B, who met the tougher rules, is gonna get an easier permit, easier operating permit.
Right, I followed,
competitive
I followed,
advantage.
That process, though, that's on paper here, I think that's covered.
What if he can't meet those new rules?
right.
But we have had no problem with.
Then he
that
shouldn't get the
conditional use.
permit.
But it's gotta be clear, I think it's gotta be clear as to which rules apply.
Are we issuing a new permit, new conditions, or are we just transferring a name on this piece of paper?
Right,
See, that's my point.
that's the point.
That's exactly my
But you're
point.
protecting yourself, though, too, because you don't know what the new plan may be, the new person, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That's why you have this process.
Right.
The public hearing process, yeah.
Yes, it could be a fly-through, or they could be complicated because they're too modern-esque or whatever it is. I think
Why
we're-
don't, if we just say the new permit's required, I mean, this is basically requiring a public hearing is almost the same as requiring a new,
It's
it's as cumbersome as a new permit anyways. So why don't we just say that transfer permits are not required, are not, are not allowed.
Must be approved.
Any transfer of permit, it has to follow the process for a new permit, basically.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Now, that'll hold up the sale
Right.
The transfer, yeah.
until you get the conditional
But
use.
the permit, the
And then
public
you're not-
hearing's
then
required
you're an
anyways.
applicant, and you're not really the owner.
Yeah, but the public hearing would be required if we allow transfers or not, so it's still the same timeline.
Right.
It still may take multiple meetings either way to get all the issues.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna hold anybody up.
So I'm gonna put a note in here that basically just says that a new permit is required.
We're gonna have to have another meeting to go through
Yeah, we're not
all
gonna
these
get
changes
yes.
anyway, so. Yeah, I had one
Have
come,
the mask on.
I had a headache when I came here.
Anybody ever heard the term hypercapnia?
No.
Hypercapnia is breathing your own CO2, it's a health hazard.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, okay, Sean, so you got a note on
yeah.
eight?
I got a note on that, to
Okay,
come
number
with some
9.
language, yeah.
I think, Sean, didn't we talk about on number 9, termination, to add letter D in here as specified in the conditional use permit? This is termination if, as follows. There could be something in the conditional use
Yeah,
permit that
that's a great point.
specifies it.
Yeah, that's a
We
great
just
point.
need to add it in as letter D.
D, yeah.
Okay, we're on number 9, guys.
Yep.
Termination of conditional use, and I just suggested we could have a conditional use permit that self-terminates. We actually just granted one of those with the cell tower. We said if it isn't used, it terminates. If it
That's
isn't
in the
used in a
code, right?
12-month period or something, Sean, it
Right,
terminates.
yeah, we
That's
specifically
number
added
3
something.
there, yeah, under B.
Discontinued, right, but we specifically added in their permit as well.
Right, and it might have been even tougher than this.
It was different than 12 consecutive.
Yeah, it was different than
ones, I think.
B3.
But it could be other things. It could terminate based on other things. It
You're right.
basically says, hey, you know, if you don't sell this product anymore, you don't use the property in accordance, that it terminates, whatever it may be.
Right. Right, we should have at least the flexibility
Right, to
to
add
put
something.
that in the conditional use permit, a termination provision outside of our ordinance, where it makes sense.
If that condition goes above and beyond what we're requiring in the ordinance, I don't know if we can do that, can we?
For termination?
Yeah. Like say, discontinued for a period of 12 consecutive or 18 cumulative months. Can we say 18 consecutive or in
We can say whatever
24?
we can say whatever we want in the conditional use permit if it's agreed to by
But
the
if it
applicant.
says this in the ordinance, we can't make it more than that.
No,
Is that,
yeah, we might.
We might, we could go, when we get into specifics, right, in the back, you know, when we go through business by business, we could have in there,
There might be certain businesses or certain things. I mean, the discontinuation was just an example that we used based on a recent thing, but it could be anything that's written in the permit.
Yeah. This has been pretty standard for a long time.
It has been.
though.
Right. But the permit could contain a condition that triggers a termination. Hey, if you violate this.
In addition to the
In
time
addition,
period.
to these, yes.
Yeah.
right, and that would be my only point in the ordinance to say, you know, it terminates. If inside the conditional use permit, it says you terminate. Okay, good. Fred's not here, but, 10, continuation. Oh, okay, so we started talking about this, number 10 with the
Yeah,
word allowed,
we
and
dove in
permitted
right away.
conditional
Yeah.
use, and,
Yeah.
So I added the language that is no longer an allowed permitted conditional use instead of an allowed use. So I made that change. Does everyone agree with the intent of this section? That basically
Yes,
doesn't create
exactly.
messes all over the place?
That's when you went through, yeah.
right. Yeah, should we just, as a technical matter,
The opposite of what you did in 8.
I mean,
No, because
Now you're saying-
this has got nothing to do with transfer. This just means that, hey, you operate this conditional use, it's no longer on our books, you can continue to operate it, you can personally amend it. But this has nothing to do with transferring the permit, this is just your
I
permit.
understand that, but here it says, you know, you change the requirements, but you gotta adhere to the old requirements that your conditional permit was written by.
But
That's just the opposite of what we did, because we said if we change the,
we're saying we repeal it. This is only the case where we repeal a use. So it's no longer even allowed, it's not even listed in the book anymore. So you just have to operate based on what your conditional use permit says, you amend it based on what your conditional use permit says. The other is about transferring and using whatever's
yeah, that
latest.
I understood, but
I'm,
never.
no, maybe I'm not hearing you.
right, this is This is the so-called grandfather.
The grandfather.
Correct,
If
right.
the use is entirely repealed from the ordinance, it no
Right.
longer, event barns no longer exist in the ordinance, but you operate an event barn, you can continue to do that under the conditions of your permit, you can even amend it under the conditions of your permit.
Or let's take a better example, churches, because we have them.
Yeah,
You struck them in, out of conditional
we
use.
struck
Struck them,
churches, yeah.
so does that mean our churches have to close? No.
No.
10 would save them. In
Right.
fact, it also say they could come in and make amendments
That's right,
to what they had before,
right.
right? And the only thing I would have on here is for how long, and that would just be for clarification, for how long
Forever,
until it's terminated.
till it's terminated by,
Terminated under 9
by
or?
9, yeah.
Under 9, you're right,
Right.
right? So maybe you want to make that as a clarification. Maybe that would help Jim too, to your earlier point.
So basically, this provision remains into effect until the permit's terminated,
Right,
something along those lines.
something along those lines, yeah. Otherwise, there is an inconsistency there. Because we do have a bunch of conditional use permits that are no longer in use, not terminated, they're just there.
But they may effectively be terminated based on,
The non-use
based on
piece.
non-use, yeah.
Right, right. Okay, are we good with 10, for now anyway?
Yep.
Okay, B, okay, now we're on letter B, which are, subject to foregoing, here they all are. First one up, it's alphabetical order, it looks like, adult-orientated establishments.
Right. And so there's a whole nother section in the code on this, on adult-oriented establishments that handles this, because it's a tricky thing because they're protected First Amendment businesses, and there's certain things you can and can't regulate with these, same as like cell towers, and so this is this just has to do with the recognizing them as a conditional use, but all the actual provisions for them are in a different section altogether.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, there's 1,000 feet. Is that a
Right.
law? Shall be located,
No, that's not a law, that's a Vernon thing. You don't
That's
have
what
to
we
do,
put in there.
that's
couldn't even
located,
do a quarter mile at 1320. Somebody put it in a long time ago,
In where?
this zoning code. Someone, some board, some people wrote 1,000 feet in there a long time ago, or whenever they did it. As long as we're making amendments, I think everything in here is up for discussion.
it is up for discussion. But this is not, there's nothing about noticing, this is just about distances
From a residential district, a playground,
yes.
a public park, a church.
Right. And so I think that 1,000 feet is, I've seen it before for similar ordinances.
What's our sexual resident, 1,000? We always complained that was short too. Yeah,
Now, so what you can't do though is sometimes when you make changes to these maps, if we changed it from 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000, we might actually have to map it to make sure that there's still locations that these can be. You can't zone these out of your village. So if you make it so restrictive that there's only one spot left in the village for this in a commercial district, well, you're gonna get sued if someone comes in and tries to locate one of these. So they can't be so restrictive that there's nothing left. There's no actual law in terms of, hey, there's gotta be 2 locations, or 3 locations, or 4 locations. It just has to be reasonable that they could locate somewhere in the village. So the only point I'm making is if we bump that up too high, we'd have to check.
right, if we have to, if we bump it up to if we bump it up to a mile or a half mile even. But we do have a map for our sexual residency already done at 1,000, don't we?
Sure,
It's
but we'd have to
posted out
map, we'd have to map every residential district, every playground park, every church, every, structure housing the residency, and then every bar or restaurant that holds an alcoholic beverage license and buffer those out and see what's left over. So, right now, we're assuming 1,000 feet, you say it may not be enough, we're assuming it leaves enough spaces in the
Right, and
village
the only
for
reason I
these.
say that is because we did it for the sexual residency.
Right, so I could, if you wanted me to draw a map and show where all these are and buffer these all out, I could do that and see what's left. But if we're getting too far in the rabbit hole in this one at the moment.
Just brought it up for discussion.
But if you could do it for the
Current
map
hours?
that we have out there from 1,000 to 2,000, and give you a parameter on what that, and then,
But that's just for residencies. That's not all these other things. Every residential district, every park, every playground, every church, every school, every daycare.
Okay, that sexual residency goes to playgrounds, public parks, churches, right?
Oh, it does have all
Yeah.
those on there.
yeah.
Yeah,
but not
daycares,
Not residential development.
Not all residential
Not-
districts, every
right.
residential district.
They wouldn't live anywhere.
yeah, right, then that's
Right, and so that's
So
the
it
one
is-
that's not accounted for, and so
Right.
that would be a lot tougher to map out and see what's left over.
Actually, maybe leaving it at, well, I would like to know if we even mapped it out in the first place.
May not, they just said 1,000 and said, that sounds good.
How far did you wanna go tonight, Carl?
On this thing?
Yeah, and I've got a doctor's appointment tomorrow morning.
Oh, it's 10:30. Well, we can pick it
We'll
up,
have to pick it up next time.
we can pick it up next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I knew we weren't gonna get through the agenda, like I
I
said.
got 29
You know.
pages to go. so-
Well,
Right.
let's keep it on the agenda,
Yeah, let's keep,
Both on.
yeah, keep both on,
and whatever we get to, we get to.
and bring your materials,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay, well, thanks for.
Would
starting-
anybody,
starting
would
to-
anybody entertain like doing, because to me, this is one of these leftover things that should have been done, hasn't been done, and there's good, you know, prior board didn't do it. We haven't done it since I've been on for over a year. We were trying to incorporate as a village, we had other things,
It's
but,
time, it's time
but it's
consuming,
time.
and there's never any time left in the meetings.
Do a green
and-
meeting?
yeah, I was gonna say, would this board be entertained where all we would do is this and not get cluttered with anything else,
That's a
just
better
that?
idea anyway.
Yeah, just focused in on it?
We should have done that anyway,
Because our audience is not sleeping.
because,
There is something to be said for that, one thing, and you focus on that, one item on your agenda and get it done.
yeah, when I had Karen's note here, it says homework for the future, I thought that's what we're gonna do. Strictly that, homework, let's do that.
So I
Okay.
make a motion to adjourn?
No? Do we wanna get a date when we wanna do this, meet next?
Sean, when are you available?
Please don't make it Wednesday.
Should I ask,
What do we email over?
During the day, I'm
pretty flexible. I mean, during the day I can be.
Should I get some dates and then email?
Oh,
Yeah, sure.
I'll do that. I'll get some
Yeah.
dates from Sean, email you guys, and then,
beautiful, yeah,
do you prefer mornings or afternoons?
Afternoon?
afternoon works for me, I can do that.
Depends on the day for me.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's enough.
Tuesdays look like good days. I don't seem to have anything scheduled on any Tuesdays.
Yeah, get us a date and,
Okay.
Oh, good, that'd be great,
yeah.
yeah.
You're
Thank
the
you.
ones work during the day, right?
I work all the time.
Oh, you were retired? Oh, you didn't tell me.
Semi-retired.
Now can I make a motion to adjourn?
Now you can, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, all in favor,
Aye.
opposed? We're adjourned, ten
Sean,
thirty.
thank you again.
Yeah, you're welcome, thanks, everybody.
Thanks for dragging her,
Good night.
it's good. Thanks for coming. Fred and Dan?
Yep.
Did you second?
Yep.
10:37, no wonder, 3.5 hours.
Or what are you gonna tell me? Or you wanna take it home?
I'd like to read it, please, man.
Then I attached this, payment.
What do you pay up? Good,
$145.
and he's all the way through,
Yes,
except
ma'am.
for maybe a little dribble here, or somebody who actually read that.
I had to come in on Sunday and get, the event times.
They asked for it.
The event
They have a
times.
wedding scheduled on September 18th, you know,
So,
in addition to the ones they've already had there.
will they add something?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did anybody complain, or did we just do that?
I didn't get any complaints, but Carl said he read it.
Read it,
Facebook.
or some other social media account, maybe not Facebook.
They're up and running?